that America is racist. That is a lie. America is not a racist country.
Haley also attacked her former stomping ground at the United Nations, saying it's a place where dictators, murderers, and thieves denounce America.
Overall, Senator Tim Scott was the star of the night. That's according to Iona College political science professor Jeannie Zaino.
Tim Scott gave a very, very good speech. He was personal. He was also tough. I think it's also telling that both he and Nikki Haley described the Democrats and Joe Biden as socialist. I think that's something we're going to hear. And I'm not sure the Republicans were quite as positive and optimistic overall as they said they were going to be. But of course, there's still 3 nights left, so they can get more positive.
Night one of the convention largely painted a portrait of fear in America. That effort was aimed at the president's base, according to Bloomberg political contributor Rick Davis.
I think that they revved up their base. I mean, this is really manna from heaven for Republicans out there. And we know that's what Donald Trump likes to do. He's not big in outreach. And so this convention is going to reflect his interests, and his interests for the last 3 or 4 years have been to keep his base happy.
And President Trump is looking to the RNC to spark a rebound in support and close the gap with Joe Biden, who is leading in most national and swing state polls.
Turning to financial markets now, U.S. futures are gaining after yesterday's record close. Stocks in Europe are rising, the dollar is weaker, and Treasury yields are moving higher. Shares of Exxon, Pfizer, and Raytheon, however, are falling after a big shakeup on the Dow Jones Industrial Average. And here at the very latest is Bloomberg's Tom Busby.
Karen, it's the biggest reshuffle in 7 years. ExxonMobil, Pfizer, and Raytheon Technologies are being kicked out of the Dow. They'll make way for Salesforce, Amgen, and Honeywell International. The action was prompted by Apple's stock split, which reduced the weighing of tech in the index. The change marks a stunning fall from grace for Exxon, which was the world's biggest company just 9 years ago. Exxon had been the longest-serving member of the Dow. Its stock has fallen 4 of the past 6 years and is down 40% since January. I'm Tom Busby, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Thanks, Tom. Positive signs on trade between the U.S. and China are giving a lift to stocks. Washington and Beijing are reaffirming their commitment to the Phase 1 deal as part of a biannual review. Overnight, high-level officials on both sides discussed the steps China's taken and agreed to push the deal forward. As of now, China would need to buy about $130 billion of goods in the second half of this year to comply with the agreement.
Jack Ma's Ant Group has officially filed for an IPO in Hong Kong and Shanghai. The billionaire's financial services company plans to use the filing to bankroll its expansion. Ant provided no financial details, though Bloomberg News has learned the firm is targeting a valuation of around $225 billion. S&P futures higher this morning, up 12 points. Dow futures up 148. NASDAQ futures up 15. And the 10-year Treasury down 8/30 seconds. Yield 0.68%. Yield on the 2-year 0.16%. Straight ahead, the latest world and national news. This is Bloomberg.
All right, Karen, thank you. It's 6:07 on Wall Street, and Michael Barr has more on what's going on around the world. Michael?
Thank you very much, Nathan. Protests continued in Kenosha, Wisconsin, well into Monday night after the police shooting of a 29-year-old black man Sunday went viral. Some demonstrators openly defying the city's curfew. The state is preparing for additional protests in the coming days over the shooting that seriously wounded Jacob Blake. They've called in the National Guard to help law enforcement if needed. Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers.
We must begin the long but important path towards ensuring our state and our country starts to live up to our promises of equity and justice.
Here in New York, hundreds marched through the streets last evening protesting the Blake shooting. Posters reading, "Please stop shooting us" and "Abolish the police" were held by demonstrators in Manhattan. Tropical storm Marco may have lost steam as it nears Louisiana, but the Gulf Coast is now preparing for another storm, Laura. Bloomberg meteorologist Rob Carolyn has the latest.
Marco is no more. Strong upper-level wind shear tore the system apart yesterday afternoon and last night, and that's good news for the Gulf Coast because it means no heavy rain for Louisiana today. However, we're really concerned about Laura, which is now entering the Gulf of Mexico. The water temperatures ahead of the storm, 90 degrees, so it should undergo a rapid period of intensification, and it could be a major hurricane by the time it makes landfall somewhere along the Texas-Louisiana border Wednesday evening. It could go in as a Category 2 or 3 hurricane. I'm Rob Carolyn, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Firefighters aided by weather and reinforcements are hoping to continue their progress against California wildfires that have killed at least 7 people and ravaged counties in the San Francisco Bay Area. New York Mayor Bill de Blasio made made an about-face concerning the reopening of cities' schools. De Blasio says he will give principals the option to hold classes outdoors, citing concerns about the air quality and ventilation at schools across the city during the pandemic. Meanwhile, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo says it was a record for coronavirus positive tests in the state.
The infection rate today is 0.66. That is the lowest infection rate that we have had since we started this.
Cuomo says the state's infection rate for the past couple of weeks has been below 1%. New York is investigating whether President Trump's company falsely reported the value of his assets to secure loans and get tax benefits as claimed last year by Trump's former personal lawyer, Michael Cohen. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thanks. It's almost 6:10 on Wall Street. Let's get the Bloomberg Sports Update now. Here's John Stashower.
Thanks, Nathan. You're not going to lose if you don't give up a goal. The Islanders with another shutout victory like the last game versus Washington. This one was also 4-0 to open the series with Philadelphia's Semyon Varlamov. Second straight shutout, and the Islanders' 8 playoff wins. They have yet to allow more than 2 goals in a game. Dallas beat Colorado 5-2 for a 2-0 series lead. NBA playoffs, Miami finished a sweep of Indiana. That series figured to be closer. Milwaukee and the Lakers both won for 3-1 series leads. Oklahoma City down 15 in the third quarter, rallied past Houston to tie that series at 2. The day after Philadelphia got swept, the Sixers fired Brett Brown, their coach the past 7 years. The Nets also just got swept, looking for a new coach, and what might be wishful thinking, Nets reportedly will try to hire Greg Popovich away from San Antonio, where he's been for 25 years, winning 5 titles. Does have a relationship with Nets GM Sean Marks, one of his former players. The Mets are healthy after a player tested positive, everyone else negative. The Mets, after 4 postponed games, return to Citi Field tonight for a doubleheader against Miami. The Yankees also back tonight in Atlanta. Garrett Cole on the mound, Aaron Judge back in the lineup.
Anytime coming off the injury, I know they're going to want to, slow play it a little bit, maybe mix in a DH day one of those days, or maybe off one of the doubleheader days. But I already talked to Booney, so I'm ready to go, whenever you need me, hoping to be in right field every single game. So just looking forward first to getting through the games in Atlanta and then, back home against the Mets.
Yeah, those Met-Yankee games not played last weekend will be made up doubleheaders Friday and Sunday in the Bronx. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan?
Okay, John, thanks. S&P futures right now are higher by 12 points on this Tuesday morning. Dow futures ahead by 153. NASDAQ futures up 14. The 10-year Treasury down 8/30 seconds. The yield at 0.68%. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
Debbie Hart is president of BioNJ, which represents the interests of more than 400 New Jersey-based biotech companies. She's also a strong voice in the biotech sector, supporting research universities like New Jersey Institute of Technology. She sees NJIT as a valuable partner in attracting venture capital and biotech startups to the Garden State.
So the number one reason the companies come here to New Jersey for the biotech industry is for our talent. We estimate that there were about 30 biotech companies in the early 90s in New Jersey, about 80 in 1998. Today there are more than 400. And that growth continues, and it's come from every possible angle. Other countries, other states, they've spun out of our academic institutions as well as our biotech and our pharma companies, and we expect that growth to continue long into the future. And NJIT is a pipeline for talent, for companies, for entrepreneurs to do that important work.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
President of the Jewish Communal Fund, Zoya Raines, and her husband Robert Friedman, Jewish activists and philanthropists, talk about why they chose the Jewish Communal Fund for their charitable giving.
As very busy working parents, we wanted to focus more on the charity part of it and wanted to focus more on our children and less on the administration.
The Jewish Communal Fund is one of the oldest and largest donor-advised funds, but at the same time, they're totally up-to-date and have state-of-the-art systems for us to access and manage our contributions online. The assets in our fund at the JCF grow tax-free, so we can generate more charitable dollars to support the charities that we care about most.
Let JCF minimize your taxes and maximize your charitable giving.
We're incredibly passionate about our charity, and the JCF allows us to focus more on the charity and less on the administration and the headaches.
For more information about Jewish Communal Fund, visit our website at jcfny.org and request a new fund kit.
Not completing high school. What is the one night of your life you would go back to? The night you felt free. The night you found love. The night you felt alive. Introducing the latest single, I Feel Alive, from Central American trio Steady Rollin'. Relive your fondest memories with Steady Rollin' and their new single, I Feel Alive, today, wherever good music lives.
There's so much more on offer with a Mitsubishi L200 Series 6 Warrior. It comes with £999 initial rental, plus £269 per month. And the freedom to live the life you love. Plus, every test drive pickup is deep cleaned, and all our dealerships are social distancing friendly for your safety. Visit your local dealer or search Mitsubishi offers. T's and C's apply. Shogun vehicle leasing, business contract hire, all rentals plus 20% VAT, 36-month term, 8,000 miles per annum. Participating dealers ends 31st of September 2020.
Things have changed a lot recently, for some more than others. But if there's one thing we've gained, it's time. Time to think, time to talk, time to plan a better future. At the University of Hull, we're here to support you in doing just that. So when you're ready to take the next step, or you need someone to chat to about your degree options, remember, we're still here to help you, and we always will be. Talk to us today at hull.ac.uk/choose-Hull.
Emma, the UK's most awarded mattress in 2019. Try it out for 200 nights risk-free. Made in the UK. Go to emmamattress.co.uk to order now.
Tesco Mobile brings you the amazing iPhone 11 with a dual camera system for incredible photos for just £31.99 a month. And when you join Tesco Mobile, you'll also get up to £40 a month off your Tesco shopping in store. Because we're the only network to give you Club Card Plus for 6 months. See us in store or search Tesco Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
36-month credit and rolling monthly airtime agreements with Tesco Mobiles. Club Card Plus. Eligibility and conditions apply. Renews at £7.99 a month unless cancelled. £40 saving based on 10% off 2 in-store shops at £200 max spend monthly.
Conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Emily Chang.
Joining us now, CEO and founder of Tonal, Ali Aradi. How does Tonal stand out?
Tonal is the only complete solution if you want to strength train at home. It's one piece of equipment that uses digital weights, which is something that we invented. Replaces every machine in the gym so you can do any exercise you want. And has coaching built in, which is a combination of our coaches broadcasting out of our studios in San Francisco and Los Angeles, and AI that personalizes every workout to our members. So it's really the only complete solution and uses the most advanced strength training technology ever created.
So what has demand been like in the midst of the pandemic? And as we come out of it, people can start going back to the gym in New York. Can you keep up that demand?
Demand has been really, really great. And we had a good holiday season. And then coming out of the holiday season and then the New Year's season, we were expecting to roll into summer. And what COVID has done instead is drive demand up. Yet again, we've seen about a 3 to 4x increase in demand. Just the month of July, our sales exceeded our entire Q4. Our entire holiday season was eclipsed by sales of Tonal in the month of July. We've upped our forecast for the year by more than 2x. And we are certainly preparing for this demand to sustain.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. European stocks are climbing on an increase in German business confidence. U.S. stock index futures are gaining as well. Treasuries edging lower. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 13 points. Dow futures up 158. NASDAQ futures up 22. The DAX in Germany's up 0.7%. 10-year Treasury down 9/32, yield 0.68%. Yield on the 2-year 0.16%. NYMEX crude oil little change at $42.63 a barrel. COMEX gold down 1/3% or $6.40 at $19.3270 an ounce. The euro 1.1832 against the dollar. British pound 1.3119 and the yen 106.34. And today we are watching for a couple of reports on home prices, including one from S&P CoreLogic Case Shiller out at 9 o'clock Wall Street time. At 10, it's new home sales and consumer confidence. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael. Michael.
Karen, the Republican National Convention had a very consistent tone as all the speakers were in complete support of how President Trump has run his administration. Former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley says a Biden-Harris White House would not be the scene of independent thought.
Last time, Joe's boss was Obama. This time, it would be Pelosi, Sanders, and the squad.
Tonight's speakers will include First Lady Melania Trump. You can hear live coverage of the convention starting at 10 p.m. Wall Street time right here on Bloomberg. As Marco fell apart, the Gulf Coast turned its attention to Laura, another system following just behind that could grow into a supercharged Category 3 hurricane and a storm surge that could swamp entire towns. In round 2 of the NHL playoffs, the Islanders won Game 1, beating the Flyers 4-0. In baseball, the Nationals lost. The A's lost to the Rangers 3-2. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
All right, Michael, thanks. It's 6:19 on Wall Street, live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak on a risk-on Tuesday morning. Global stocks are rising. Treasury yields moving higher as well after positive signs on trade between the U.S. and China. Washington and Beijing are reaffirming their commitment to their Phase 1 deal as part of a biannual review. Joining us now with more from Hong Kong is Bloomberg Chief Asia Economics Correspondent Enda Curran. Enda, good morning. They're talking again. What are they saying?
Indeed. I mean, it feels like a long time ago now since that trade agreement was signed back in January. But at least when it comes to this thread of U.S.-China relations, both sides are saying the trade agreement is on track. And China, of course, is touting up its side of the bargain, which is essentially they are buying more American farm goods and food products. They're making it easier for those goods to be imported into China. They've taken off equity caps in the financial services sector on insurance and securities and the like. That's allowing in more American companies to operate in China, and they're buying oil from the U.S. at a record pace. So it all adds up to China saying we are meeting our end of the bargain. The U.S. seems happy with that for the moment. But I should say also they still have a long way to go because China, according to the regional agreement, will have to buy around $130 billion worth of goods by the end of this year alone to meet the target.
Is then China on track to meet that goal by the end of the year based on the purchases that it's made so far?
I think most people will say it's a tall order. It was already a very ambitious target in the first instance, Nathan, as you know well. There are complications now with given what's happening with commodity prices and the price of oil and the like. So I think most people would say it would be a tough ask for China to meet those targets by the year end. But, of course, at the same time, there's probably a political imperative for China. There's a view that they don't want to rock the boat on U.S.-China relations any more than they have to ahead of the election. So at the very least, between now and the election, the purchases will continue.
Obviously, the purchases themselves and reducing the trade gap are a major focus for President Trump. But what about some of the stickier issues in the Phase 1 agreement, like IP rights, like the ability of U.S. companies to get into China's financial services industry?
Yeah, you're right. Well, on the financial services industry, China says, look, we are opening the door. We're taking these steps to allow in the likes of American Express, MasterCard, and so on and so forth by removing various caps and blocks on their entry into that market. On the IP side of it, China argues they have strengthened the crackdown on counterfeits. They're now releasing quarterly reports, which are part of the agreement, to show where they are striking down on IP theft. The courts are involved in that process too. There are guidelines in place, and there's a new work plan for strengthening IP protection over 2020 and 2021. That's China's side of it. Skeptics will always say, of course, that China can do more to enforce IP protection. But on some of those stickier points, China does say, or is at least claiming it's meeting its side of the bargain.
Now, up to now, before these latest talks came through overnight, of course, President Trump had been really ramping up the rhetoric against China, saying he didn't even want to talk to Beijing anymore, saying he doesn't care about the Phase 1 deal. Does this development put all that by the wayside now?
Well, I mean, Look, I think the way to view it out here is that the trade deal was probably always going to hold, or at least it should hold, because there is a political imperative on the US side of things to keep that deal together, to show what they achieved when it came to negotiating with China. And on the Chinese side of things, as I said earlier, they're not necessarily looking to rock the boat any more than it already has been. And I think ultimately anyway, this deal over merchandise goods and market access to some extent is quite separate from the national security issues that is dominating the conversation, especially when it comes to technology and, of course, concerns over territorial assertion by China and the like. So I think for the moment, this trade is being seen as something separate. It's managing to avoid the skelter going on in the other areas. But of course, it doesn't mean it's not completely out of danger, and there is a chance between now and the end of the election that there is more scrutiny on the China trade story, and we'll see if President Trump does put this trade agreement under some kind of threat before the end of the election.
All right, Enda Curran joining us from Hong Kong this morning. Thank you for this. Enda Curran is Chief Asia Economics Correspondent for Bloomberg News on this morning after trade representatives from the U.S. and China did get back to talking overnight, reaffirming their commitment to the Phase 1 agreement. And that does certainly seem to be giving a lift to markets this Tuesday morning, with S&P futures right now higher by 12 points, Dow futures ahead by 155. NASDAQ futures are up by 14 points right now. 10-year Treasury now down 9/32. The yield is up to 0.68%, and the yield on the 2-year Treasury note 0.16%. Stay with us. You are listening to Bloomberg Daybreak on this Tuesday morning.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. The Dow Jones Industrial Average had not included enough technology firms, and that's put the Dow at a disadvantage this year. So when Apple, which does trade on the Dow, announced a stock split that reduced the sway of big tech on the average, the Dow made plans to reshuffle. So it's kicking out ExxonMobil, Raytheon, and Pfizer as of a week from today, and will add Salesforce.com, Amgen, and it'll bring back Honeywell. Walmart's grocery rivals are eating into the retailer's grocery share. Kroger and Albertsons, which own Safeway, have seen quarterly sales rise by double-digit percentages. That's chewing away at Walmart's dominance in the grocery market. And some of it could be that Walmart's core shoppers might not eat out as often as shoppers at other grocers. On Wall Street, the U.S. and China are signaling they are still behind that Phase 1 trade deal. That's prompting investors to send stock futures higher. S&P futures are up 12, NASDAQ futures 19, Dow futures 151. Joan Doniger, Bloomberg Radio.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President, Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seizechange.
Emma, the UK's most awarded mattress in 2019. Try it out for 200 nights risk-free. Made in the UK. Go to emmamattress.co.uk to order now.
Tesco Mobile brings you the amazing iPhone 11 with a dual camera system for incredible photos for just $31.99 a month. And when you join Tesco Mobile, you'll also get up to £40 a month off your Tesco shopping in store. Because we're the only network to give you Club Card Plus for 6 months. See us in store or search Tesco Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
36-month credit and rolling monthly airtime agreements with Tesco Mobiles. Club Card Plus. Eligibility and conditions apply. Renews at $7.99 a month unless cancelled. £40 saving based on 10% off 2 in-store shops at £200 max spend monthly.
September. Back to schools and colleges for all. Let's hear how it's been from mum of 3, Jessica.
Well, 3 kids out of school has been tough. Trying to keep them to the routines and focused on their schoolwork is a balancing act like no other. It's going to be a bit different when they return to school, but I'm so relieved to get them back with the teachers in the classrooms.
If you have any questions or concerns about schools and colleges returning this term, go to gov.uk/back-to-school.
Let's face it, it's not been the year we expected. But that won't stop us squeezing the barbecue out of the shed, all squeezing onto one table, leaving room for the odd unexpected guest. Down, boy. While not forgetting to squeeze out every last drop of sunshine, or every last drop of Heinz. Heinz sauces. Squeeze the most out of summer.
Hampton Court Palace has hosted many spectacular feasts throughout its history, and this August bank holiday weekend is no exception. Bring a picnic blanket and enjoy a summer celebration of food and drink at the Hampton Court Palace Food Market. You can also explore Henry VIII's home and gardens, and kids can run wild in the Magic Garden. It's all included in your ticket. Spend an extra tasty bank holiday weekend at the Hampton Court Palace Food Market. Pre-book online at hrp.org.uk.
Whether you fancy owning a swimming pool big enough to have its own yacht, or just a yacht big enough to have its own swimming pool, what you need is dream come true money. Luckily, tonight's Euro Millions jackpot is £109 million. Now that's dream come true money. Euro Millions from the National Lottery. Play online or on the app. Estimated jackpot rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
It's 6:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and we're just about 3 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. Day one of the Republican National Convention is in the books, and more on that coming up in a moment. But first, U.S. futures are gaining after yesterday's record close. Shares of Exxon, Pfizer, and Raytheon, however, are falling after a big shakeup on the Dow Jones Industrial Average. And here with details is Bloomberg's Tom Busby.
Karen, ExxonMobil, Pfizer, and Raytheon Technologies are being kicked out of the Dow. They'll make way for Salesforce, Amgen, and Honeywell International. The action was prompted by Apple's stock split, which reduced the weighing of tech in the index. The change marks a stunning fall from grace for Exxon, which was the world's biggest company just 9 years ago. I'm Tom Busby, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Tom, thank you. Stocks in Europe are rising. Treasury yields are moving higher in the U.S. after positive signs on trade between the U.S. and China. Washington and Beijing are reaffirming their commitment to the Phase 1 deal as part of a biannual review. Overnight, high-level officials on both sides discussed the steps China's taken and agreed to push the deal forward.
We're learning more about the premium being paid by J.P. Morgan to take over its joint venture in China. The bank needs to pay at least $1 billion to buy out its Chinese mutual fund business. That's a 50% premium over the appraised value of its partnership with Shanghai International Trust.
Jack Ma's Ant Group has officially filed for an IPO in Hong Kong and Shanghai. The billionaire's financial services company plans to use the filing to bankroll its expansion. Ant provided no financial details, though Bloomberg News has learned the firm is targeting a valuation around $225 billion.
Back here in the U.S., Apple is reopening some U.S. stores that were closed due to coronavirus. That's according to sources who tell us the company will open a small number of locations as soon as this month. In most cases, the stores will operate on an appointment-only basis.
And Janet Yellen is taking aim at the Senate for not passing a new coronavirus relief bill. The former chair of the Federal Reserve is out with an op-ed in the New York Times criticizing senators for leaving Washington without a stimulus package. Yellen says millions of Americans will suffer and the overall economy could degrade if lawmakers don't pass a bill when they return after Labor Day.
And futures are higher. S&P futures up about 13 points. Dow futures up 164 and NASDAQ futures up about 17. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. The DAX in Germany is up 0.7%. 10-year Treasury down 10/32, yield 0.68%, and the yield on the 2-year 0.16%. NYMEX crude oil is up 0.1% or 6 cents at $42.68 a barrel. And COMEX gold is down 0.25% or $5.30 at $19.34 an ounce. Straight ahead, the latest world and national news. And this is Bloomberg.
Okay, thank you, Karen. It is 6:33 on Wall Street, and this news update is brought to you by Land Rover. Visit your tri-state area Land Rover retailer for special lease and finance offers. Land Rover, above and beyond. Good morning, Michael Barr.
Good morning, Nathan. We're heading into the second day of the Republican National Convention. Yesterday, speakers delivered dark warnings about the future if Democrat Joe Biden becomes president. Donald Trump Jr.
It's almost like this election is shaping up to be church, work, and school versus rioting, looting, and vandalism.
Republicans tried to make the case that Trump and the party have done a lot to help minorities. Senator Tim Scott.
Our side is working on policy, while Joe Biden's radical Democrats are trying to permanently transform what it means to be an American.
You can hear day 2 of the convention live on Bloomberg starting at 10 p.m. Wall Street time. Anger over the shooting of a black man by police spilled into the streets of Kenosha for a second night. Police again fired tear gas and hundreds of protesters who defied a curfew and threw bottles at law enforcement. In New York, hundreds of people gathered to protest the police shooting in Wisconsin. Demonstrators marched in Manhattan demanding justice for Jacob Blake. As Tropical Storm Marco fell apart, the Gulf Coast turns its attention to Laura. Bloomberg meteorologist Rob Carolyn has the latest.
Marco is no more. Strong upper-level wind shear tore the system apart yesterday afternoon and last night, and that's good news for the Gulf Coast because it means no heavy rain for Louisiana today. However, we're really concerned about Laura, which is now entering the Gulf of Mexico. The water temperatures ahead of the storm, 90 degrees, so it should undergo a rapid period of intensification, and it could be a major hurricane by the time it makes landfall somewhere along the Texas-Louisiana border Wednesday evening. It could go in as a Category 2 or 3 hurricane. I'm Rob Carolyn, Bloomberg Daybreak.
While California firefighters are doing the best they can against the wildfires, the state is waiting for more help from outside. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter reports.
The situation is still dire. Governor Gavin Newsom with the overview.
4,292 wildfires this time last year. Today, over 7,000 wildfires, 7,002 burning now. North of 1.4 million acres.
He says 7 people have died. He says help from the outside is on the way. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Manhattan District Attorney Cyrus Vance agreed to delay enforcement of a subpoena for President Trump's tax and financial records until after a federal appeals court decides whether or not to put the request on ice for even longer. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts, more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. It's almost 6:36 on Wall Street. Time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update. Good morning, John Stashar.
Good morning, Nathan. The Islanders keep winning. They won the series with Florida in 4 games. They beat Washington in 5, and last night they took the series opener with Philadelphia 4-0. Andy Green scored 6 minutes in, his first playoff goal in 10 years. 3 more goals in the third period. J.P. Pajot with his 5th of the playoffs. Anders Lee his 4th. Second straight shutout for Semyon Varlamov. Lakers paid tribute to the late Kobe Bryant the day after what would have been his 42nd birthday. And on the date 8/24, the 2 numbers that Kobe wore, Lakers jumped in front of Portland 15-0 in the round. Was on 135-111 for a 3-1 series lead. Philadelphia 76ers fired coach Brett Brown. They might now pursue Ty Lue, who won an NBA title with Cleveland, or Villanova's Jay Wright, who won 2 NCAA titles. Mets GM Brodie Van Wagenen, after a Mets player and staff member tested positive.
I know that our players take it seriously, and we have a high degree of confidence that this exposure that we received is not as a result of anyone misbehaving or failing to be responsible with their own safety.
Mets are healthy now. After 4 games were postponed, they'll play 9 games over the next 6 days. Doubleheader tonight at Citi Field with Miami. Doubleheaders Friday and Sunday with the Yankees in the Bronx. The Yanks return tonight in Atlanta. The Angels' Albert Pujols last night moved past Alex Rodriguez. Pujols now second on baseball's all-time RBI list, 210 behind Hank Aaron. Latest athlete to test positive, Usain Bolt, the 8-time gold medal winning sprinter. John Stashar with Bloomberg Sports. Nathan?
All right, John, thank you. It is 6:37 on Wall Street.
The following commentary is from Bloomberg Opinion.
Are real yields a fake out? Basic math says yes. I'm Brian Chapata, a columnist for Bloomberg Opinion. The financial markets have been obsessed with real yields for a while now. With U.S. Treasuries trading in a range, stocks roaring back to record highs, and gold suddenly regaining its luster, the fact that inflation-adjusted interest rates were deeply negative seemed like an obvious way to link the moves. I'm here to tell you that the sharp decline in real yields is something of a fake out. Using a model from Fed researchers that deconstructs yields on Treasury inflation-protected securities, or TIPS, reveals that market-based inflation expectations have barely budged during the coronavirus crisis. Rather, the swing in TIPS liquidity since March, from none to plentiful, has accounted for the vast majority of the move in break-even rates and real yields. That is far from the pervasive narrative. The signal from the TIPS market, then, isn't so much that inflation is making a comeback, but that expectations haven't changed much throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. Across the curve, history suggests the climb in inflation break-even rates will get much harder from here. I'm Brian Chapata. For more opinion, please go to Bloomberg.com/opinion or OPI and Go on the Bloomberg terminal.
This has been Bloomberg Opinion.
You can hear Bloomberg Opinion commentaries every weekday at this time, and terminal customers can read more at OPIN Go. Coming up today, we get earnings from Salesforce. The company reports afterward it's joining the Dow Jones Industrial Average next week. Here with more is Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
The analysts surveyed by Bloomberg are looking for adjusted earnings per share of 66 cents on revenue of $4.9 billion. Bloomberg Intelligence says Salesforce may report a mixed quarter with steady demand for commerce and customer service products offset by weak sales in marketing and platform software. The pandemic is forcing enterprises to shift their IT budgets to focus on cloud products that provide immediate benefit, such as commerce software that enables online selling or customer service products aimed at client retention. Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Charlie, thank you. Apple has won an early court victory in its fight with Epic Games, the maker of Fortnite. A judge spared Apple from having to immediately reinstate the video game on its App Store, but the judge also blocked Apple from limiting Epic's ability to provide key graphics for other apps. Disney is leading America's old media giants and making money from streaming. According to Macquarie Research, Disney will generate more than $11 billion in direct-to-consumer revenue this year. That's almost 20% of total sales. The Disney Plus streaming service has already attracted more than 60 million subscribers. On the economic front today, we get the latest reading on home prices from CoreLogic. And here with more is Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
Home prices have held up during the pandemic. COVID-19 has boosted demand for property away from city centers, while Federal Reserve policy has pushed mortgage rates to historic lows. Also today, the government reports on July new home sales. In June, the median sales price rose to $329,000, the highest since February. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Okay, Vinny, thank you. S&P futures up 13 points. Dow futures up 174. NASDAQ futures up 17 points. This is Bloomberg.
I've always wanted to learn another language, but every time I try, it never sticks. So I decided to give Babbel a try, and I really like the teaching method of the app. I started with the beginner lesson on Babbel, and it starts with simple words and phrases, and soon you're putting those words into a conversation. Each lesson takes about 10 to 15 minutes, and they're all really different, which keeps things interesting. The app is really smart. It actually keeps track of the words I'm struggling with so I can practice them and get better. I chose Babbel because it was created by real language teachers. They built it around real life, how people actually communicate, and what they care about. I can't wait to use my new language skills in the real world. Dos cervezas, por favor.
With Babbel, get conversational in Spanish, French, German, and more. It just takes 10 to 15 minutes a day. Now try Babbel free. Just go to Babbel.com and start learning a new language today. That's Babbel.com. Babbel.com.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
You always say the best thing you ever did was join up. I bet you don't get the same experiences in Civvy Street, especially the expats. pride. Lots of people are rejoining now. It's easy. And we'd love to have you back. Go on. Feel the pride again. Search RAF Rejoiners.
Emma, the UK's most awarded mattress in 2019. Try it out for 200 nights risk-free. Made in the UK. Go to emmamattress.co.uk to order now.
Let's face it, it's not been the year we expected. But that won't stop us squeezing the barbecue out of the shed, or squeezing onto one table, leaving room for the odd unexpected guest. Down, boy. While not forgetting to squeeze out every last drop of sunshine, or every last drop of Heinz. Heinz sauces. Squeeze the most out of summer.
Don't miss the buy one, get one half-price event, now on at Lloyd's Pharmacy. You'll find something for everyone when you mix and match across hundreds of products. Everything from big brand skincare like Aveeno, back-to-school essentials for the little ones, a wide range of vitamins and supplements, plus much, much more. So don't miss the buy one, get one half-price event. Shop in store or online at lloydspharmacy.com today. Lloyd's Pharmacy, always here for you. Cheapest item half-price, selected lines only, subject to availability. Excludes Lloyd's Pharmacy stores within Sainsbury's.
Right now, everyone wants to stay entertained for less. So we're giving you a massive entertainment package for a teeny tiny price. TalkTalk TV and Faster Fibre is just £25.50 a month, fixed for 18 months, plus a year of Amazon Prime on us. Average speeds of 38 megabits a second, plus unlimited fast delivery. Thousands of movies, TV shows, and more from Amazon Prime. Search TalkTalk TV. TalkTalk for everyone. Offer in 2nd of September, subject to availability. T's and C's apply.
Whether you fancy owning a swimming pool big enough to have its own yacht, or just a yacht big enough to have its own swimming pool, what you need is dream come true money. Luckily, tonight's Euro Millions jackpot is £109 million. Now that's dream come true money. Euro Millions from the National Lottery. Play online or on the app. Estimated jackpot rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
To a network of news and financial information 24 hours a day. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
Republicans open Monday night's primetime convention.
We have 6 incredible people who were held hostage by various countries.
Using the White House as part of the convention setting, President Trump, in a video where Americans previously held hostage abroad could thank him. No criticism of Democrat Joe Biden. That was left to others like Donald Trump Jr., warning that Biden wants to eliminate all of his father's tax cuts.
Biden has promised to take that money back out of your pocket and keep it in the swamp. That makes sense, though, considering Joe Biden is basically the Loch Ness Monster of the swamp. He's been lurking around in there. He sticks his head up every now and then to run for president.
Biden has said he would only raise taxes on the wealthy and corporations. Bob Costantini, Washington.
As Tropical Storm Marco makes landfall, the Gulf Coast turns its attention to Laura, another system following just behind. Forecasters warn Laura could arrive as a Category 3 storm tomorrow. I'm John Trout.
This much data demands 3 of the best.
That's a number we've never perceived.
How are you cautious?
Everybody is crowding into the same trades.
Bloomberg Surveillance, weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. And now watch us on Bloomberg Television. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. stock index futures on the rise this morning. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 14 points. The Dow futures up 188. NASDAQ futures up 21. The DAX in Germany is up 0.8%. 10-year Treasury down 11/30 seconds. Yield 0.69%, and the yield on the 2-year 0.16%. NYMEX crude oil is up 1/3% or 15 cents at $42.77 a barrel. COMEX gold down 1/3% or $6.50 at $19.3280 an ounce. The euro 1.1835 against the dollar. The yen 106.47. Watching some earnings across the Bloomberg. Medtronic reporting a first quarter profit that beat analyst estimates, and Hormel Foods reported third quarter net sales that also beat. And watching shares of Gap, they're up about 5% this morning after the shares are raised to buy at Citi. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, President Donald Trump and speakers at the Republican National Convention sought to paint a positive picture of his widely criticized handling of the coronavirus pandemic. The keynote speaker was Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, the only black Republican senator in Congress. Senator Scott said race relations in America are not as bad as Democrats paint them out to be.
Our family went from cotton to Congress in one lifetime. And that's why I believe the next American century can be better than the last.
Bloomberg will carry day 2 of the convention. You can hear it live at 10 p.m. Wall Street time. In round 2 of the NHL playoffs, the Islanders won Game 1, beating the Flyers 4-0. In baseball, the Nationals lost. The A's lost to the Rangers 3-2. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Okay, Michael, thanks. We are live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, where it's coming up to 6:49 on Wall Street. Time now to check what's going on in D.C. Among some of the top stories in our nation's capital, the U.S. and China reaffirmed their commitment to the Phase 1 trade deal. New York sues President Trump's company and his son Eric to enforce subpoenas. And Postmaster General Louis DeJoy says the president's attacks on mail-in voting are not helpful. Also making news, of course, the Republican National Convention opening with appeals to the president's base and warnings about Joe Biden. Bloomberg U.S. politics editor Kathleen Hunter joins me now to give some of her impressions of night one. What stood out for you, Kate?
Well, I think that it was really a bit of a contrast with the what we heard from Democrats last week, particularly, obviously there were a lot of tributes to Trump and, very positive portrayals of Trump's time in office thus far. And really but I guess it was similar in the sense that what we did see was sort of a lot of talk about a very kind of dark picture of America, only this time around the dark picture was portrayed as being the result of if Biden were to win as opposed to Trump winning. So I think both sides are using the fear tactic a little bit, at least early on in the convention. They're just, using it against each other in different ways.
Yeah, interesting to note that given that the Republicans in the lead up to the convention had been promising positive vision for the next 4 years of the Trump agenda, have we heard any of that yet?
Easily in the summer. We haven't heard a lot of that really thus far. Although, again, I feel like if we look back at the Democrats last week, we saw Michelle Obama, for instance, start out talking a lot about Trump and not very much about Biden. But by the time we got to the end of the week, it was Biden and Harris both laying out their visions for what America would look like under their watch. And so, I would imagine that as the week goes forward, we may hear more of that from Republicans. But at the same time, I'm thinking back to, Trump's rhetoric on the campaign trail this year and his convention acceptance speech 4 years ago. And, he is a president that likes to talk about, the dangers that America faces and the sort of paint a dark picture of what could happen without him as the bulwark against that. So I wouldn't be surprised if we hear that type of message again from Trump on Thursday night.
What did you make of the speeches that we heard in the primetime hour from 3 potential candidates for president 4 years from now? Nikki Haley, Donald Trump Jr., and Tim Scott.
Well, these are all, rising stars within the party. Particularly, I'd say, Nikki Haley is someone that's been watched very closely. I think that she, wasn't as laudatory to Trump as some of the others. But I think that, for any of these candidates or potential candidates, for any of these Republicans, I think getting this type of a speaking spot definitely is an opportunity to raise your profile. And it sort of becomes, in some ways, a self-fulfilling prophecy because it's a sign of who the Republican Party themselves see as potential heirs apparent to Trump. And so that's a very significant thing in and of itself.
What's the challenge for some of these potential torch bearers once the president does pass the torch eventually for them to distinguish themselves beyond the imprint that President Trump has put on the party over the last nearly 4 years now?
Well, I think the big question for anyone that follows in Trump's footsteps is going to be how much, they are going to take the party in a different direction from, the real, I think, past shift that we've seen Trump take the Republican Party on. I think it was, starting out with the Tea Party wave in 2010 and then, continuing on, culminating participating in Trump's election in 2016, we've really seen a different center of gravity for the Republican Party than the one that Ronald Reagan put forth, 40 years ago when he was elected. He talked about an interventionist foreign policy. He was someone that was much more fiscally conservative. I think that, Trump has definitely taken Republicans in a different direction, and the big question for whoever follows him is going to be whether they follow in his footsteps or whether they, hew in a different path.
All right, let's look ahead to night two. What are you going to be listening for this evening?
Well, I think one of the highlights of tonight, and it's going to be really interesting to watch, is going to be Mike Pompeo's speech. He is currently traveling abroad. He just landed in Sudan, but he did record a speech yesterday when he was in Israel, and I think the just sort of optics of a sitting U.S. Secretary of State delivering a political speech, even though he's not, the State Department has been very adamant, and he's been very adamant that this is not being delivered in his official capacity, but the fact that he's doing it while on a trip overseas, and with that kind of a backdrop, I think will be very unusual to say the least, and, interesting to watch and hear what he has to say and how he manages to, balance those two things. We'll also hear from Melania Trump tonight, the First Lady, and I think that that's also going to be one to watch in the sense that, I think there we will definitely see more of a personal appeal or a personal, portrait painted of the president.
And ahead of the second night, following night one, Politico this morning just reported that some former Republican appointees to the Justice Department or to senior ethics roles in the Reagan and Bush administrations are endorsing Democrat Joe Biden. What are we hearing?
And this is coming on the heels, it's important to remember, of yesterday, around the same time, the Biden campaign releasing the fact that several former Republican lawmakers, including and led by Jeff Flake, a former Republican senator, were endorsing him as well, or endorsing Biden, not Trump. And so I think this is some effective, potentially effective counter-programming by certainly strategic counter-programming by the Biden campaign to try to, cut into some of the, inevitably positive spotlight that Trump and his supporters are utilizing this week at the convention.
And just quickly, of course, the president has been warning that a Biden administration would lead to a cultural revolution in America, warnings from the radical left. Could we potentially hear more of that as the convention goes on?
Do you think China has a preference?
I definitely think that's going to be a theme that we will hear again and again as we move through the different nights of the convention, and I would be very surprised if it wasn't one of the main themes of Donald Trump's own speech on Thursday.
All right, Bloomberg U.S. Politics Editor Kathleen Hunter, thank you as always. And a reminder, you can hear live coverage of night two of the Republican National Convention. The RNC begins at 10 p.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio and Bloomberg Television. Karen?
All right, Nathan, thank you. 6:55 on Wall Street. It's time for the Bloomberg NJIT STEM Report. It's brought to you by New Jersey Institute of Technology, ranked #1 nationally for student upward economic mobility and in the top 2% nationally for mid-career earnings of graduates. Learn more at njit.edu. Now, here's what's making news in science, technology, engineering, and math. The head of the FDA is walking back his claim about the effectiveness of blood plasma for COVID-19 patients. Commissioner Stephen Hahn had said the treatment could save a huge number of lives. Now he's reversing himself, saying on Twitter, quote, "I have been criticized for remarks about the benefits of convalescent plasma. The criticism is entirely justified." Hahn says the data show a relative risk reduction, not an absolute risk reduction. Earth has lost 28 trillion tons of ice in just 23 years. That's according to research from Imperial College London and the universities of Leeds and Edinburgh. They've been studying the impact of the climate crisis on ice around the world using satellite data and found that 28 trillion tons were lost between 1993 and 2017. Apple has won an early court victory in its fight with Epic Games. That's the maker of Fortnite. A judge spared Apple from having to immediately reinstate the video game on its App Store. But she also blocked Apple from limiting Epic's ability to provide key graphics for other apps. And Disney is leading America's old media giants in making money from streaming. According to Macquarie Research, Disney will generate more than $11 billion in direct-to-consumer revenue this year. That's almost 20% of total sales. The Disney Plus streaming service has already attracted more than 60 million subscribers. And that's the Bloomberg NJIT STEM report. Futures this morning are higher, with S&P futures up about 15 points. Dow futures up 192 and NASDAQ futures up about 17. Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Lisa Abramowitz is straight ahead. For Nathan Hager, I'm Karen Moscow, and this is Bloomberg.
Influential.
Tesco Mobile brings you the amazing iPhone 11 with a dual camera system for incredible photos for just $31.99 a month. And when you join Tesco Mobile, you'll also get up to £40 a month off your Tesco shopping in store. Because we're the only network to give you Club Card Plus for 6 months. See us in store or search Tesco Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
36-month credit and rolling monthly airtime agreements with Tesco Mobiles. Club Card Plus. Eligibility and conditions apply. Renews at $7.99 a month unless cancelled. £40 saving based on 10% off 2 in-store shops at £200 max spend monthly.
Let's face it, it's not been the year we expected. But that won't stop us squeezing the barbecue out of the shed, all squeezing onto one table, leaving room for the odd unexpected guest. Down, boy. While not forgetting to squeeze out every last drop of sunshine, or every last drop of Heinz. Heinz sauces. Squeeze the most out of summer.
How do we control coronavirus now? Listen to Steph. She's a bus driver.
Now that people are using public transport again, we really need to make sure that we keep each other safe. Passengers need to stay 2 metres apart. If that's not possible, make it at least 1 metre. I want to see everyone wearing face coverings over their mouth and nose unless you've got a good reason not to. And when you get to where you're going, you need to wash your hands. We've still got to play our part.
Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
On the Bloomberg Business app and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Seeing a lot of divergence within the market in terms of valuation.
There is a disconnect between what's happening in public equity markets and what's happening on the ground.
The stock market doesn't reflect the real economy. Mainstream is struggling.
The pace will probably slow down now that we've had this quick rebound.
We've got less supply, we've got demand being stimulated, and that imbalance should lead to higher prices.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrow, and Lisa Abramowitz.
Good morning, everyone. Jonathan Farrow, Lisa Abramowitz, and Tom Keene. We say good morning to you, a simulcast. Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television Worldwide. Thank you for your response to our simulcast. It helps to have an August with a lot to talk about as well. Lisa Abramowitz, today is so different from Monday. What I observe is the bond market finally confirms the higher equity prices, risk on, equity up, and finally we get prices down and yields up across bonds.
Yeah, people are starting to get worried about inflation, and this is important ahead of the Thursday speech from Jerome Powell of the Federal Reserve, where they set out their new regime. I don't know how long it can last, though, Tom, given the fact that we still are getting signs that there are going to be layoffs. I'm thinking of, in particular, of Delta coming out overnight and saying that they may have to lay off nearly 2,000 pilots after the September period where they're locked in to avoiding those. I gotta say, still a lot of headwinds out there, Tom.
I agree, and the partition of America right now is extraordinary. We just spoke to the congressman from the 4th Congressional District of Arkansas, and Mr. Westerman made real clear his Hot Springs economy is actually really, really good, and it sets up the inequalities and differences that you see between Democrats and Republicans. Of course, our convention coverage, we'll see that later tonight. One quick data point before we get to the complete data check. Futures up 15. Lisa, you've looked at the brief of the morning.
Yeah, and I'm just looking in particular what you were talking about, consumer confidence for the month of August. We're going to be getting that today at 10 a.m. Wall Street time. The narrative has been greater resilience than expected in the face of more coronavirus cases. Interesting to see whether that continues. After market, we get a tale of two markets. We get earnings from Salesforce.com, which was just a given a road into the Dow index for the first time. Also from Nordstrom and Urban Outfitters, which are on the front lines of the war that is brick and mortar retail. And as you mentioned, Tom, day 2 of the Republican National Convention, Melania Trump to speak and expected to try to humanize President Trump, perhaps taking a bit of a different tone than what we heard last night, Tom.
Well, we will see Melania Trump speaking, the senator from Kentucky, Rand Paul, speaking as well, a number of other voices in day 2 of the Republican convention. Let me look at the data right now. Futures, as I mentioned, up 14, Dow futures up 186. Those levels, 28,425 on the Dow futures, SPX 3441. The VIX doesn't move. We're going to get to that right here in a moment, 22.37. Dollar weaker. All in all, I don't want to make too much of that. I would mention Turkish lira, 7.39 is backed up nicely. A weaker Turkish lira over the last 2-3 days. Mr. Erdogan speaking of his disappointment in economic matters and the way people are pushing around his Turkish economy. Gold not part of the story, maybe 1932 the ounce this morning. Right now we want to get started, and Lisa and I do this with Stuart Kaiser of UBS, who writes trenchant and highly mathematical notes for UBS. He is head of equity derivatives research with lots of Greek letters, lots of partial differentials, and we're not going to do that on an August Tuesday. Stuart Kaiser, I want to look at the VIX, and your work is brilliant, and that the VIX that we quote is 22.37, but the future view of the VIX is very fearful and is a much higher number of about a 28 level. Is that unusual?
It is unusual to have such a large difference between spot VIX and where the futures are pricing. And I think, there's a couple things that go into that. Obviously, the election is going to be part of that. And then, a lot of the economic risks that you cited would be as well. If you look ahead of previous elections, that gap between spot VIX and call it the October future is normally, somewhere around 1.5 to 2 points. And now it's more like 3.5. So that kind of gives you some perspective in how much uncertainty is priced into the election right now.
Should the VIX be lower right now? I mean, it's, I get the research articles that say it's flawed, et cetera. But with what we've got in the digital dominance, what we've got in stock splits, what we've got with this news of a digital dominance of the Dow Jones Industrial Average, should the VIX be a 19 or 18 even?
If you look ahead of previous, I don't know, 1918, we could debate the exact number, but it probably should be a bit lower. U.S. volatility in particular is at a pretty large premium to what the market's actually been realizing. So how much, the market's actually been moving. And, we could assign that to a lot of reasons, coronavirus, FOMC, election, et cetera. But, big picture, U.S. implied volatility is higher relative to baseline market moves than the rest of the world is. So, yeah, I think you could argue you could be a few points lower from here. I think you're just going to have trouble finding people, willing to sell it at that level.
Lisa, some breaking news. Best Buy here not doing a Target or Walmart, but in with better comp sales. And what I love about this, Lisa, operating in a dynamic environment is a quote from Best Buy as they look at,
That's optimistic.
Well, it is. I mean, some of these retail winners, and clearly Best Buy is one of them. It's really remarkable what we're doing, how our behaviors changed in pandemic America.
It turns out that having a big box with stuff in it actually was helpful when people were looking for stuff to occupy themselves during the pandemic, which brings us to how people are positioned right now in the markets in terms of optimism. And Stuart, one thing people have been focused on is the short positioning in equities and how that has come down dramatically with yet another bear in the market throwing in the towel. Citigroup coming out overnight and saying, forget it, it's going to keep rallying. What do you see in terms of positioning and the amount of bearishness currently priced into markets?
It's a really good question. I think, generally speaking, the trade for the last probably 2 years, and this is before Corona, was to be in a relatively safe type portfolio in U.S. equities. So, I think the starting point was not an overly aggressive type of equity exposure. So to me, it's not too surprising to see, people not hedging as much as you might expect just because they don't own what you would consider kind of a risky asset. If you look at how downside is priced into equity, into derivatives markets, options markets, it's it's not particularly out of line right now, and it's not too extended. So I think to your point, that should be a good corollary to short interest. There is some hedging out there, but it's maybe not what you might expect given the level of uncertainty that most investors fear. And I think that links back to the fact that the types of stocks they own are not the riskiest stocks, right? They own these large cap techs, these low volatility stocks, the high dividend yield stocks that don't, require demand for hedging the way it would if they were kind of all in on the quote unquote cyclical trade.
This is a really important point, especially as you talk about the uncertainty. And at Tom's point, with Best Buy, they are not providing guidance, sort of falling in line with a lot of other companies, saying we just can't predict the future right now. Without that visibility and just betting on a dividend payment, what exactly are stock investors buying right now? Are they simply buying the hope that the Federal Reserve will keep rates low indefinitely for the foreseeable future?
Well, I think there's a lot of optimism priced into both to the Fed, I think, to the election as well as to vaccine outcomes. I think, I don't want to say it's consensus, but I think, a lot of investors we talk to are expecting relatively good outcomes on all three of those fronts. So in that sense, yeah, you're buying, hope to some degree. But if you were to look at like the standard deviation of earnings estimates, for instance, those are still very, very wide. And that's because of just what you cited, that we're not getting guidance from companies. So analysts don't really have a good idea of where these earnings are going to be. So the range of outcomes is wider than it has been, which leads to more volatility, which leads to kind of more uncertainty. So I think all of those things are sort of linked together. But if you ask me, I think there's a pretty high bar at this point for the Fed and for vaccine news as well, because I do think people are pricing, pretty good outcomes on all three of those big drivers.
If you're just joining us, a simulcast on Bloomberg Radio and Bloomberg Television, Stuart Kaiser of UBS with us. We welcome all of you. An eventful number of hours here as well. Stuart, what's the short squeeze story? I mean, this phrase convexity, acceleration, gamma, you get that supercharged feeling. Is there the shorts out there to squeeze us, to drive us higher in equities?
But if you ask me, I think there's the short data doesn't show that there's a huge squeeze out there. I think the squeeze might be more cash on the sideline getting squeezed into the market. So not necessarily people that are short equities, but people that have been hesitant or cautious to actually dip their toe in as the price action keeps moving higher, particularly in very popular or well-known companies. That almost forces people into the market. So maybe it's more of a cash squeeze than it is a short squeeze. But you mentioned sort of capitulation on price targets before. You may have people that are sort of capitulating on their caution, and that's equally as important, right? It's still cash flowing into the market, and it's still a new buyer to push prices higher potentially.
Stuart, we have some bears that are capitulating. You've got some bulls that are also capitulating. Morgan Stanley's Mike Wilson coming out and saying the market could be due for a sell-off if Congress passes a bigger than expected stimulus, and that leads to a rate hike or a rate rise broadly in markets. Do you see that as a potential for a near-term shock?
Yeah, we definitely see higher rates as a risk to the market. The way we've been looking at it is, even though you've had a move in rates recently, inflation expectations have also risen, and typically equities respond very favorable to rising inflation expectations. So the inflation is kind of balanced out the move higher in yields. We think inflation expectations, 10-year break-even, something like that, are pretty fully priced at this point. So additional upside from here in rates would be a little bit more of a tightening and would probably be a risk to equities. So particularly real yields, particularly kind of around the 10-year space, that would be an event, that equities would have to deal with. We dealt with a little bout of it early in August fairly well. If we got another piece of it, it could be a bit of a risk. And, perversely, some people are looking at good vaccine news as a potential driver of that. If you had a credible U.S. vaccine announced and it looked like it was going to be widely distributed, that could put upward pressure on both growth expectations and rates. And at least at the index level, that could be a little bit of a sell the fact event, even though below the index level, you have a lot of these sort of, deeper cyclical stocks that could catch up. And that's your kind of rotation, scenario.
We'll steal from anybody, folks, but we always give credit when we steal. Effective immediately. It's the acclaimed Kaiser cash squeeze. That's what we're looking at. I like that idea. I'll steal that from you.
Please no.
I'll steal that from you. The Kaiser cash squeeze, it's coming. Wait, maybe that's the next tuition check. Stuart Kaiser of UBS, thank you so much for joining us today. Lisa, you okay?
I'm fine, but really, how many guests have to leave the show saying, please no, Tom, please no, don't do it? I mean, really.
It's great to have these derivatives guys on, folks. They are so smart mathematically. analytically, looking at the dynamics of the market. It's a real challenge, like you just get them to speak basic English as well. Our English is futures up 14, Dow futures up 188. Coming up, Regina Mayer joins us with KPMG. We'll look at something we haven't looked at that much. Oil. Futures up 15. This is Bloomberg. Now with the latest news from New York City and around the world, here's Michael Barr.
Tom, Lisa, thank you very much. Republicans opened day one of their primetime convention with dark warnings about America's future if President Donald Trump does not win a second term. Two of the Republican Party's rising stars, both people of color, offered an optimistic view of Trump's leadership Monday night. They cast him as a protector of religious freedom, the nation's workers, and more. Former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, among the marquee speakers, went after Democrats on issues of race relations.
In much of the Democratic Party, it's now fashionable to say that America is racist. That is a lie. America is not a racist country.
Bloomberg will carry coverage of day two of the convention starting at 10 p.m. Wall Street time. Demonstrators in Wisconsin again marched against the police shooting of a black man in the back. Police again fired tear gas and hundreds of protesters who defied a curfew threw bottles and shot fireworks at law enforcement guarding the courthouse. The shooting that seriously wounded 29-year-old Jacob Blake turned Kenosha into the nation's latest flashpoint in a summer of racial unrest. Before Monday night's demonstrations, Kenosha County District Attorney Michael Gravely asked the community for patience.
These kind of huge decisions in a community that's hurting badly as we are today are not decisions that can be made in haste, and they are not decisions that can be made before we have the complete information to make fair and just decisions.
Chancellor Angela Merkel demanded full transparency from Vladimir Putin's government after a German medical team determined that Alexei Navalny, the Russian leader's most prominent critic, was likely poisoned last week. Global news, 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically. Yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
The following is a message from PGIM.
Welcome to Outsea in 60, Perspectives from PGIM Thought Leaders. Here's Mark Baribeau, the head of global equity at Jennison Associates.
You're looking at bigger implications of technology playing a role in keeping us all connected, giving us access to information or goods very quickly. So we don't see any of those trends changing. In fact, they're likely to accelerate. There's some new things that have come along, though, that people might find useful, like telemedicine. There were skeptics about that, and I think the more people using it, especially the more doctors are using it today, the more they're liking it. You can see more patients, it can be more effective. It might actually be a better solution.
Hear more PGIM perspectives at pgim.com. That's PGIM.com. Partner with PGIM, the investment management business of Prudential. These statements are not intended to be investment advice and should not be used as the basis for any investment decision.
Influential conversations from...
In September, you'll all be going back to school or college. Let's hear from Andrea, head teacher.
I know it feels strange having been away from school for so long. It's going to be a bit different for all of us. But it means getting back to your mates, to learning, to discovering. It's getting back to building your future. Remember to stay safe on your journey to school or college and walk or cycle where you can.
If you have any questions or concerns about returning this term, check out gov.uk/back to school.
Let's face it, it's not been the year we expected. But that won't stop us squeezing the barbecue out of the shed, all squeezing onto one table, leaving room for the odd unexpected guest, down boy, while not forgetting to squeeze out every last drop of sunshine, or every last drop of Heinz. Heinz sauces, squeeze the most out of summer.
Right now, everyone wants to stay entertained for less, so we're giving you a massive entertainment package for a teeny tiny price. TalkTalk TV and Faster Fibre is just £25.50 a month, fixed for 18 months, plus a year of Amazon Prime on us. Average speeds of 38 megabits a second, plus unlimited fast delivery. Thousands of movies, TV shows, and more from Amazon Prime. Search TalkTalk TV. TalkTalk for everyone. Offer ends 2nd of September, subject to availability. T's and C's apply.
Don't miss the buy one, get one half price event, now on at Lloyd's Pharmacy. You'll find something for everyone when you mix and match across hundreds of products. Everything from big brand skincare like Aveeno, back to school essentials for the little ones, a wide range of vitamins and supplements, plus much, much more. So don't miss the buy one, get one half price event. Shop in store or online at lloydspharmacy.com today. Lloyd's Pharmacy, always here for you. Cheapest item half price, selected lines only, subject to availability. Excludes Lloyd's Pharmacy stores within Sainsbury's.
We live in a world that only wants you to believe in the bad news. Racially, economically, and culturally polarizing news.
In much of the Democratic Party, it's now fashionable to say that America is racist. That is a lie. America is not a racist country.
Some of the comments last night at the Republican National Convention, the first night, a very different look and feel than what we saw from the Democrats in terms of technology and usage of it as well. The senator from South Carolina and also former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, speaking there. Right now, Kevin Cirilli, our chief Washington correspondent. Kevin, do you detect here that night after night after night, the Republican convention will be the same? Is there a consistency here, or was that a one-off theme last night that will move on to other themes over the next 3 days?
I think this evening's theme is going to be much more focused on foreign policy, with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's speech coming this evening, another notable speech, First Lady Melania Trump. I think last night what you saw were two things. First and foremost, a foreshadowing of a potential 2024 Republican presidential primary. But in the short term, I think what you saw last night was Senator Tim Scott really talk about diversity through the lens of conservative ideology, and Nikki Haley, the former UN ambassador, speaking in a much more calming tone that, quite honestly, would play particularly well in some of those suburbs that the re-election campaign has sought so hard to make up ground on.
It seems to be, and I say this just from statistics in California and other places, a shrinking Republican Party. Is there any angst out there over the popular vote portion that they command now, or is it just strictly about establishing an electoral vote victory?
You know, I think that's a great point in terms of the math and the Electoral College is how you win an election in the United States. And so as a result of that, President Trump lost the popular vote to Hillary Clinton by several million votes in 2016. He would like to see that happen again. But if you look at the strategies of both campaigns, they're both playing to the Electoral College.
Kevin, from a polling perspective, how are both conventions, the Republican and the Democrat, playing with actual voters at this point?
Well, I think if you look at the NBC News Wall Street Journal poll that came out yesterday, in which the president is trailing by 10 percentage points, it would suggest that the Biden campaign did get a slight bump following the announcement of Kamala Harris as his running mate and following the virtual convention last week. But there's a tale of two competing narratives, because, Lisa, when you look at that poll, for example, on the issue of the handling of the pandemic, voters disapprove of President Trump. But on the issue of who is best suited to handle the economy, President Trump leads by 10 percentage points. So it's that dueling narrative that the Republicans want to see addressed in the days ahead.
Well, one of the main narratives that I heard last night at the Republican National Convention was Democratic cities being overrun with crime and defunding the police, and that narrative really being hit hard. How well does that play for the Republican Party in general in these polls?
According to my reporting, you look at what they're saying is that the internal polls, Lisa, on the issue of law and order is going to play particularly well. Law and order was what they were insinuating last night. But the second point here, and you heard this from Senator Tim Scott, the Republican from South Carolina, talking about school choice. And when I talk to sources on the president's reelection campaign, they say that as families are staring down the reality of whether or not their kids can go back to school, school choice is something that they feel will help them not just make inroads in the suburbs, but also amongst a certain percentage of minority communities.
Kevin, a delicate question, and folks, this comes from the credibility and earned credibility of Kevin Cirilli with miles and miles and miles on the campaign trail across this nation. Kevin, there was last night one of the speakers who alluded to the president as the bodyguard of Western civilization. Can you translate that?
It's globalism versus nationalism, and it speaks to a certain portion of the president's base. But they're speaking in very broad terms of this is, someone who a certain faction of the Republican Party would say is a nationalist versus globalism.
Well, I mean, it harkens back to what Steve Bannon, I guess this was talking about months ago, the Nationalist Union Party as well. How would you presume the Democrats will respond to those tones, those illusions that were heard last night?
I put that question yesterday to Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. She is a Democrat who represents a congressional district in Houston. And what she said, she's a member, she's actually the chairwoman of the subcommittee on cyber intelligence and the deputy whip of the Democratic caucus. And what she said was that it's this issue of Western alliances, restoring Western alliances versus a go-it-alone approach. She consistently said that the Biden administration would favor multilateral conversations, not just on the economy and on foreign policy, versus a unilateral approach from President Trump.
I mean, it's interesting you say that, Kevin. I've heard this from a number of people, as the great foreign policy distinction is a multilateral or bilateralism versus what we've seen from President Trump. Will Secretary Pompeo underscore that today in his speech?
Yeah, I think what he's actually going to make the case on is on Israel, the president's support for Israel, and on taking a tougher stance against the Communist Party of China. But I also think they push back on the notion that they haven't been able to get allies on board in areas of agreement. If you look, for example, on building a 5G network that moves away from China internationally, they would point that they've been able to have success on that front.
He's the bodyguard of Bloomberg surveillance. Kevin Cirilli with us, our chief Washington correspondent. Kevin, good luck at night 2 of the Republican National Convention. Lisa, I find it absolutely fascinating how far we have come from any memories. I was talking to David Weston about 2004, Peter Jennings' last convention at ABC, and all the emotion there. Really, the Kennedys almost retiring with Ted Kennedy. It's amazing where we've come in 8 years, 12 years, 16 years.
This is a unique moment on many levels, not only because of the coronavirus, but definitely in a shift in the American spirit in certain ways, but also the resilience. I will say the backdrop to me, what Kevin was talking about with foreign policy, is very interesting. Mike Pompeo going to be speaking later at the same time that we're getting news that the U.S. and China seem to be more on the same page with a trade agreement than previously expected. You seem skeptical. At the same time, it seems to be a dampening of some of the tensions that were ratcheting up just a couple weeks ago.
Fair. And I will say, as we said at the opening of the hour in this simulcast, we've certainly seen it in the markets. The huge distinction today, folks, is the bond market with the stock market in correlated link. Equity futures up 12 right now. Dow futures up 177. And yields are higher. 30-year bond out 4 basis points. 10-year yield out 3 basis points as well. David Weston tonight, the RNC convention, 10 p.m. Coming up, Mark McCormick will join us with Toronto Dominion Bank. We're thrilled to have him on foreign exchange. Part of that is a weaker Turkish lira today. may be idiosyncratic. Part of that is the mystery of the dollar, decidedly not idiosyncratic.
For the Jewish Communal Fund, Noel Spiegel, former senior partner with Deloitte & Touche and past JCF president, discusses the advantages of a donor-advised fund over a private foundation.
There's a lot involved in having a private foundation. You need to engage attorneys, you need to engage accountants, file tax returns. At JCF, all of that is done for you. You don't have to get involved in anything other than making your contribution to your fund and then determining which grants that you want to make.
A JCF fund may be opened with a minimum $5,000 contribution of cash or appreciated securities and can be used as an alternative to or together with a private foundation.
If you have a foundation, you have to list all of the contributions that you made. Potentially anybody, because the information is public, can find out exactly which organizations a foundation has made charitable contributions to.
Let JCF simplify your philanthropy and protect your privacy. Learn more about JCF's private client group at jcfny.org.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. They already dominate the NASDAQ. Soon, tech companies will hold the most sway on the Dow Jones Industrial Average, too. In 1 week, ExxonMobil, Raytheon, and Pfizer will be kicked off the index to be replaced by Salesforce.com, Amgen, and Honeywell. The biggest realignment for the index since 2013 comes as Apple gets ready to split its stock. That will reduce its influence on the price-weighted average. A big quarter for Best Buy. Comparable sales last quarter rose nearly 6%, about a third better than analysts thought. And they were thinking sales would have gone well since there's so much working and coming up learning from home. People restocked their laptops and other tech. Profits were a lot higher than targeted, too. And while Best Buy isn't making formal predictions, it is seeing sales this quarter to be better than the same quarter last year. On Wall Street, S&P futures up 15, NASDAQ futures 8, Dow futures up 187. I'm Joan Doniger, Bloomberg Radio.
If knowledge is power, the Bloomberg Terminal is your power up, connecting you to real-time financial data, market-moving news, powerful analytics, and an influential network of financial decision makers around the world. Share ideas, negotiate trades, and gain the insight you need to make more informed decisions. See how the terminal can take your workflow to the next level at Bloomberg.com/professional.
The journey to a cure will be covered right here.
2 shots once a year.
When are you going to publish your data?
Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly. Weekday afternoons at 2 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning, everyone. Simulcast, Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television. John Farrow, Lisa Abramowitz, and Tom Keene. Mr. Farrow off on sabbatical. Lisa, looking at yields here and looking at that nominal yield, inflation expectations down to the real yield, and it's interesting, a negative 1.01, substantial negative yield. How would you suggest Chairman Powell will address that conundrum in his anticipated speech?
Well, I think the key aspect of his speech is going to be how he looks at inflation, how the Fed is going to measure inflation, what their inflation goals are going to be looking ahead. But, Tom, to your point, the idea that we're seeing yields get a lift in nominal terms, and yet real yields, particularly on the short end, remaining near record lows, well below negative 1%, tells you something. Tells you about how much the Fed is pegging yields lower, and frankly, how much real prices right now are not reflecting the inflation expectations.
I really want it does for the business community as well. And with the Best Buy earnings that we saw earlier, maybe not Walmart, Target like, Amazon like, but nevertheless, the winners and losers within the American economy, I've never seen it this stark, Lisa.
Well, the idea that Best Buy has no visibility into the future is something we're hearing more and more, which raises questions about the amount of debt that some of these companies are raising because of the Fed policies, because of keeping rates so low. The idea of the road to where? The road to we don't know. The road to I don't know, but when we get there, we're going to have so much more debt that our growth is going to be that much slower. And I expect the Fed to address that on some level on Thursday.
Well, our bookers, they did the great job here of getting us into conversations that really have to do with the season. And the one great season is back to school. And when it's Lisa Abramowitz and Tom Keene and Mark McCormick of TD Bank, their global head of FX strategy, the entire conversation before this was on Minecraft Bed Wars and how our children's brains are rotting. I mean, the collapse of our children as we know it, sitting in front of their pandemic computers is mind-numbing. Mark McCormick, is a foreign exchange market as mind-numbed as our children are?
I would say they're Minecrafting.
What are we going to see with the dollar? I mean, the mystery here and the range-boundedness of Japanese yen is extraordinary.
Yeah, so the dynamics are changing, obviously. So we're going through a regime shift in the currency markets where obviously a lot of it's tied to COVID and the ending of American exceptionalism, which we've had for the past couple of years. But a bigger driver is really, as you mentioned, the real yields are moving lower. The growth story is changing around the world. Fiscal policy and geopolitics are changing the landscape, and the dollar is extremely overvalued. So you haven't been able to sell the dollar on valuation for the past 2 years. But when you put those ingredients together, potentially with the fiscal architecture we're seeing in the Eurozone, this is a secular downtrend in the dollar that could be 10, 15, 20% over a 2-year period. But going in the Jackson hole, a lot of this is priced in. So again, short-term tactically, the dollar looks a little bit overdone. Again, we can see the euro maybe pull back to 115, 116. But it would be a modest consolidation in a deeper, broader downtrend, again, with the major question being the election.
Let's go back to first principles. Give us a safe haven update. I mean, the idea of Swissy locked like yen, locked at 107, euro Swissy as well. What do you learn from studying the safe havens of foreign exchange?
Well, it's interesting, too, because the nature of the safe haven is changing. If you look through COVID, we have a risk model that basically proxies cross-asset stress. And the euro has bobbed and weaved as a pro-cyclical currency and as a safe haven. Swissy has acted like a safe haven. Yen has acted like a safe haven. Even sterling in this environment is acting quasi-safe haven because what's happening is we're not seeing the same demand we are for the U.S. dollars, and those safe haven trades are unwinding. So what's interesting is EM is lagging this, but the high-power G10 alternative reserve currencies plus gold is driving what you would call kind of a differentiation along the lines of what's deemed a safe currency in this environment. So, so as long as we're in a pro-risk environment, the dollar is going to continue to unwind. But even I think if we were to see risks stumble a bit, I think the euro is going to be a little bit more distinguished in what we've seen the past couple of years. So even if risk pulls back, the euro can still rally, whereas Swiss and the yen will continue to act as traditional safe havens, largely because the Japanese have invested in foreign equities around the world. And that's the big driver of the yen, is how foreign equities move in terms of volatility.
Tom, I love it. Some people come on and they say sterling is an emerging market currency. And some people like Mark come on and say that it's a haven currency. I don't know. This is the confusing world that we live in today. And the dynamics behind it also confusing at a time when there still is more than $15 trillion worth of negative yielding debt. At what point will that drive more foreign flows back into the U.S., providing a support to the dollar that perhaps people are discounting when they write it off as the ultimate haven?
Well, I think what's critical with the dollar is a lot of people talked about when Trump was elected was a twin deficit. And it was a big concept and it was an important driver for markets, but it didn't make any money. If we did back tests looking at different themes and different economic realities that you can trade that kind of reflect different market regimes. And trading the twin deficit was a massive loser for the last couple of years because the current account and the budget deficit were offset by equity and repatriated capital flows. I think as we move forward, the fixed income market is going to be less of a dominant driver for currencies because central banks are all moving in the same direction. Even emerging markets are converging to where G10 is. And again, if you go back to the yen, the 10-year spread on the G9 average versus a JGB is basically minuscule now. So there's really no high-yielding G10 currency anymore. So if you think about it, what's really going to matter is the perceptions of growth, capital flows, business and equity, and those kind of big picture drivers of where do people want to invest their money over the long run. And so I think even in sterling, it's interesting because if it's a broader dollar downtrend, there's currencies that even if they have current account deficits and they seem to have negative yielding debt, they will still be seen as potential attractive investment destinations when it comes to the equity side of it. And I think that's going to be the big driver over the next couple of quarters.
Which brings me to China, because that's the one major economy that's actually expected to grow this year. The U.S. expected to potentially shrink by as much as 8%. Does this mean that the yuan has a chance to actually outperform meaningfully this year?
Well, yeah, I think that's it's an important backdrop, too, because if you think about what's one of the best performing assets over the last couple of months besides gold, it's Chinese equities. And Chinese equities have rallied despite the uncertainty around the trade deal, despite the rise in rhetoric that's come from President Trump on the trade deal. You know, we got some confirmation overnight that things are moving in the right direction, and that's amplified the moves. But even despite all the lack of clarity and the uncertainty around the trade deal, Chinese equities have been a powerful force. And as you mentioned, as you started, if we go back to U.S. real yields, that is the plumbing for the entire financial system. And if you look at macro models that tell us fundamentally where U.S. real yields should be, they should be 20, 25 basis points higher. But as real rates are suppressed, we're seeing the demand for other real assets. Chinese equities are trading as an opposite view of U.S. real rates, as is gold, as is commodities, as is those alternative currencies we talked about, like sterling, which is, again, G10 reserve.
Mark, I got to rip up the script here on this insight. It's really important. Is the Dow Jones Industrial Average, is the NASDAQ 100 trading as a proxy against those depressed real yields?
Yeah, I would say if
I am placing a new order to sell short euro at 118.28. New order placed to sell short at 118.28.
investment grade credit and the dollar. So it's kind of interesting because if you have a view on real rates, you're either in that one camp, which is all high beta, or you're basically going to be buying the dollar or investment grade credit. And that's the market right now.
Mark, on the idiosyncrasies of Erdogan and Turkey as well, we're going to retest 7.40 here very clearly. That's a line in the sand for Mr. Erdogan and his bankers in a beleaguered Turkey as well. What is
order to sell short cancelled? It moved, as you can see, too fast, too far.
A lot of independence on the central bank. People feel as if the government's driving policy decisions in Turkey right now. It's a flight of capital flow. It's an emerging market with a current account deficit, and doesn't have the power and the ability to drive growth the way that, say, even again the UK or the US or the Eurozone. You know, they don't have the fiscal legitimacy to put in growth enhancing policies. So if you do look at which currencies are lagging here, there's a COVID story and there's a fiscal story, and Turkey falls into the fiscal monetary credibility story. So when you have a large current account deficit and the world doesn't really kind of trust the decisions that are being made or how they're being made, it's going to be a very poor backdrop for that currency, even though risk is rallying, which is why you see the South African rand, Turkey, and a couple other emerging markets still lagging here.
Emerging markets may be off the radar, but that won't last long. Mark McCormick, thank you so much with TD Securities as well. Lisa, just absolutely fascinating to me, the dollar mystery here. You hear Mr. McCormick talk there about big figure moves to dollar weakness. and you just wonder how the other nations will react to that.
Yeah, and certainly in the emerging nations, which you've been focusing on, and rightly so, this is definitely in the very front focus. I will say your focus on Turkey is important, and people might say, okay, you come on Bloomberg Surveillance and you get the Turkey report every day, and you do, and it's because it highlights political risk, particularly in the developing world at a time of a growing potential sovereign debt crisis. And this, to me, is a huge issue when it comes to either where you end up putting your money, but also in terms of debt blowups. And this is something I know the IMF is really concerned about, as well as a lot of major investors, Tom.
Well, yeah, and what's important there, folks, is the political nature of this, with Mr. Erdogan, an extended term there, all the uproar within Turkey, but now his expansion across the Eastern Mediterranean as far as Libya. And we've had some very, very good conversations on this, particularly the new tensions between Turkey and Greece as well. I want to do a data check here. We need to do a complete data check, because today what clicks in is higher yields, a 10-year yield, 0.69%, 3 basis point move. We go to 4 digits on a 30-year bond, 1.3967, a 4 basis point move, higher yields and lower bond prices as well. Curve steepening, don't want to say it's out of range, but nevertheless the curve steepens back as we've seen. As we talk to Mr. McCormick and his expertise on oil, we're going to go to one of the top energy experts within America. Regina Mayer has earned this at KPMG on oil. We'll speak to her here in a moment. It is a simulcast on Bloomberg Radio and Bloomberg Television. It is Surveillance. Good morning. Now with the latest news from New York City and around the world, here's Michael Barr.
Tom, Lisa, thank you very much. Day one of the Republican National Convention is in the books, and now the GOP gets ready for night 2. Tonight, the focus will be on Melania Trump, who will give a live address to the RNC from the Rose Garden. Last night, there were 2 interview segments President Trump did from the White House, but no speeches. Also tonight, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Last night, Donald Trump Jr. was one of the speakers.
All men and women are created equal and must be treated equally under the law. That's why we must put an end to racism, and we must ensure that any police officer who abuses their powers is held accountable.
You can hear coverage of Day 2 on Bloomberg starting at 10 p.m. Wall Street time. Protests continued in Kenosha, Wisconsin, well into Monday night after the police shooting of a 29-year-old black man. Although Tropical Storm Marco is weakening, heading for Louisiana, Tropical Storm Laura spent the weekend gaining strength as it brought destruction through the Caribbean. Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards says residents need to prepare for Laura's potential landfall later this week.
Laura is expected to make landfall between southeast Texas and south central Louisiana as a strong Category 2 hurricane late Wednesday or very early on Thursday.
In a rare reversal, the head of the FDA walked back his claim that an experimental therapy had provided a dramatic benefit to COVID-19 patients. On Sunday night, with President Trump, FDA Commissioner Stephen Hahn said that blood plasma from COVID-19 survivors given to new patients could save huge numbers of lives. Yesterday, Hahn tweeted, "I've been criticized for remarks I made Sunday night about the benefits of convalescent plasma. Criticism is entirely justified." Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts, more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. With a Bloomberg Business of Sports report, I'm Michael Barr. The NFL had 77 positive COVID-19 tests from 11 teams re-examined by a New Jersey lab after false positives, and all those tests came back negative. The league asked the New Jersey lab BioReference to investigate the results. Among teams reporting false positives, the Minnesota Vikings said they had 12, the New York Jets had 10, and the Chicago Bears 9. Dr. Ashish Jha, director of the Harvard Global Health Institute, says the issue is raising questions about all COVID-19 testing facilities.
Are there other labs that are having this problem that are not NFL, where people may be getting a false positive because of a lab error and don't have the same checks and balances that the NFL has?
The number of positive COVID-19 tests from a specific facility that might actually be false demonstrates the precarious position the NFL is in less than 3 weeks from the regular season opener. With a Bloomberg Business of Sports report, I'm Michael Barr.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE SIPC.
Global news 24 hours a day.
Let's face it, it's not been the year we expected. But that won't stop us squeezing the barbecue out of the shed, or squeezing onto one table, leaving room for the odd unexpected guest. Down, boy. While not forgetting to squeeze out every last drop of sunshine, or every last drop of Heinz. Heinz sauces. Squeeze the most out of summer.
Don't miss the buy one, get one half price event now on at Lloyd's Pharmacy. You'll find something for everyone when you mix and match across hundreds of products. Everything from big brand skincare like Aveeno, back to school essentials for the little ones, a wide range of vitamins and supplements, plus much, much more. So don't miss the buy one, get one half price event. Shop in store or online at lloydspharmacy.com today. Lloyd's Pharmacy, always here for you. Cheapest item half price, selected lines only, subject to availability. Excludes Lloyd's Pharmacy stores within Sainsbury's.
Right now, everyone wants to stay entertained for less. So we're giving you a massive entertainment package for a teeny tiny price. TalkTalk TV and Faster Fibre is just £25.50 a month, fixed for 18 months, plus a year of Amazon Prime on us. Average speeds of 38 megabits a second, plus unlimited fast delivery. Thousands of movies, TV shows, and more from Amazon Prime. Search TalkTalk TV. TalkTalk for everyone. Offer in 2nd of September, subject to availability. T's and C's apply.
It is all about the shift underlying the economy here. You can't really look at the whole picture. You have to look at stock by stock, bond by bond. That's the name of the game here because it is a big market share shift we're seeing.
Really interesting conversation yesterday with Michael Collins of PGIM, really talking about the dynamics of the fixed income market, some of the oddities of this August. Right now, we want to bring in a guest, and we get lucky here on the news of the Dow Jones transformation. I'll mention that in a moment as Lisa goes to Regina Mayer of KPMG, their global head of energy. There are many, many people, I should say, in the industry who work on the seminar, the conference racket, and all that. Regina Mayer has absolutely nailed ownership of the study of hydrocarbons. She does this for KPMG out of Cornell and Harvard, working at Rice as well right now in her Houston. And I just got to say, Lisa, there's so few people that work the circuit constructively like Regina Mayer. She owns, for the World Economic Forum at Davos, right on down to every other energy conference. She absolutely owns the high ground on this. But Lisa, there's something more important to talk to right now, and that is they're miserable in Irving, Texas this morning.
Yeah, it's they're watching the storm. They're watching Laura bear down on them, which is threatening a whole host of oil reserves. And let's start there, Regina. The idea that you've got these twin storms with Marco actually fizzling out, but Laura is still looking like a hurricane headed toward the Gulf Coast. How much could this disrupt oil production in the U.S.?
Well, it's less of a risk on the supply side with oil production because only about 10% of U.S. production comes out of the Gulf of Mexico, and we're sitting quite pretty with regard to crude supply. The thing to keep an eye on is refined product supply destruction because 50% of the U.S. refined capacity comes from the Texas and Louisiana Gulf Coast. So based on the current projection with Hurricane or Tropical Storm Laura projected to become a Category 3 hurricane, you could say roughly 25% of gasoline capacity is in the path. I'm less worried about that, though, because I don't think it'll take that capacity offline, but there is that risk.
And meanwhile, over in Irving, there's another storm, and that is the storm against hydrocarbons, with the energy moving away from that area, Exxon being removed from the Dow, the longest-serving member of the index after its market share fell from $450 billion of market capitalization back in 2014 to less than $200 billion now. Are we just seeing the beginning of the destruction of the hydrocarbon complex, or is this the end of the destruction?
Well, it does mark a shift in the era of where capital wants to go and what investors are going to look at. The tech stocks are clearly on a boom. I wish I had made some different choices, early in the pandemic. But it does indicate that the large industrial, the behemoths of our time are probably not where capital wants to flow. And it does mean that these very large international oil companies have to pivot their portfolios to embrace what's known as the energy transition if they're going to stay relevant. And you see the different players taking different strategies, and I do think they will pivot and survive, but this does indicate a big shift in investor sentiment.
Regina, what's the heart of the matter here is combination. I mean, we saw Anadarko take out and what Oxy's done in their overextension, and Mr. Buffet coming into play as well. Do you just see an industry roll up to get back to the size of revenues where they have scale to profit?
Well, I think it is a scale game, and you're absolutely right there. But, the bid-ask spreads are still so far apart, and where I would have thought we would have seen more of a wave of mergers and acquisitions, balance sheets are under such pressure that it's difficult to get the capital to make a play, and it's difficult to see the consolidation that we need to see. However, there have been some moves, and there was Chevron's acquisition of Noble looks very, very smart in this environment.
Well, I was going to go to Chevron, but I really don't want to talk individual securities. I mean, they go after Noble, and they got pushed out of Anadarko. I get all that. Does the big money come in? Does private equity come in and start acquiring value-priced hydrocarbons? Do you see someone like Blackstone or even BlackRock, for that matter, playing?
I think the PE firms have done their bit in the last decade, especially in the 2010s. And most of them are actually trying to pull out now. What I think we'll end up seeing is you'll see assets change hands, because the assets still have underlying value, but the companies that are structured around them with the debt and the equity portfolios that they have look less attractive. So I think we're going to have to see more restructuring, more debt consolidation, and then you'll see the assets shift, but maybe less the company logos shifting.
Have we already seen, Regina, peak oil demand?
I don't think so, Lisa. There has been some that will say 2019 might have been peak demand. We still see projections that'll take us up to 110 million barrels per day, which is still 10 million barrels per day more than we consume in 2019. And you'll still see that into the 2030 timeframe. We don't have a base of energy that will sustain all of our needs that does not include some element of hydrocarbon, at least in the foreseeable future.
Do you think the pandemic has accelerated the shift away from hydrocarbons, or do you think that it's actually slowed it because of the subduing of the price of oil?
I think it has accelerated the shift. We've demonstrated, what we can do for the environment and how we can reduce carbon simply by restricting our movements and not flying as much as we were from a business travel perspective, not commuting as much as we were, not going to different shopping centers. That doesn't directly translate into a reduction of gasoline demand, but we've seen the positive impacts we can have on carbon. And most of the other countries, when you look at their stimulus packages, they include green stimulus. Notably absent, the U.S. isn't focusing as much on green stimulus, meaning, new energy types of transitions. But globally, I believe the pandemic has accelerated the move toward the energy transition.
Regina, thank you so much. Regina Mayer with us, the KPMG, on this historic day. Exxon out of the Dow Jones Industrial Average as well. Lisa, I find it absolutely extraordinary, no other way to put it, absolutely extraordinary, this move. It's just something truly 20 years ago was truly unthinkable.
Well, and if you want to look at the why behind it, take a look at Exxon shares. They're down more than 36% year to date. If you take a look at Salesforce.com, which is a software provider that was brought into the Dow, it has gained more than 28% year to date. A tale of two markets, very much accelerating the future, bringing it to today, Tom.
Yeah, and other stories here as well. I mean, Amgen is a giant biotech, but Honeywell is really the unspoken story here, folks, as well. Honeywell was in the Dow, out it went, and they've put together such a superior industrial track record. I mean, just, Dave Cote and the rest, they really have delivered over the last 10 years. I mean, not like it is Salesforce growthiness, but nevertheless, Honeywell not getting the headlines here they should.
Tom, this just makes the Dow that much less relevant, though, right? I mean, honestly, it's just the lagging indicator because Apple did a stock split.
This guy, John Farrow.
Yeah.
I mean, he and I argue about this all the time, and I'm sorry, the Dow Jones is the fabric of what we look at. There's a romance to it there.
John, you're being trolled.
You don't get in the mathiness of John Farrow's Standard & Poor's 500. The Dow futures up 198. The Dow at 28,439. This is Bloomberg, Dow Jones Industrial Average. Stay with us.
I've always wanted to learn another language, but every time...
Are you ready to play?
This summer, ITV Hub is fully loaded with loads more full series.
It's gonna get messy.
Yeah, like it's fuller than ever. From Love Island to Laya, we have divas lined up back to back.
Fill me in, sister.
From the GC and the Ibiza Weekender reps to the Real Housewives, it's round full of lots and lots of...
This is getting too much now.
Laughs, tears and smiles. It's crammed full with full series like Quiz, Flesh and Blood, Harry's Heroes and Manx in Mumbai. We've grown, expanded and just gone a bit extra this summer.
Give me some more.
ITV Hub fully loaded this summer.
The best experience possible.
Did we mention it's looking fuller than ever?
Get your cook on with Asda. Whether it's beer battered cod, beer canned chicken or just beer. Get 2 for £18 on packs of beer, including 12 bottles of San Miguel or 20 bottles of Bud Light. Asda. Selected stores and lines subject to availability. San Miguel 330ml, Bud Light 300ml, £10 to £13 each. England and Northern Ireland only. Drink aware.
Right now, everyone wants to stay entertained for less. So we're giving you a massive entertainment package for a teeny tiny price. TalkTalk TV and Faster Fibre is just £25.50 a month, fixed for 18 months, plus a year of Amazon Prime on us. Average speeds of 38 megabits a second, plus unlimited fast delivery. Thousands of movies, TV shows, and more from Amazon Prime. Search TalkTalk TV. TalkTalk for everyone. Offer in 2nd of September, subject to availability. T's and C's apply.
How do we control coronavirus now? Listen to Steph. She's a bus driver.
Now that people are using public transport again, we really need to make sure that we keep each other safe. Passengers need to stay 2 metres apart. If that's not possible, make it at least 1 metre. I want to see everyone wearing face coverings over their mouth and nose, unless you've got a good reason not to. And when you get to where you're going, you need to wash your hands. We've still got to play our part.
Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
All over the country, all kinds of businesses are getting stuck in. Pastry chefs are whipping up treats. Hairdressers are doing do's. Plasterers are smoothing over the cracks. And vets are getting their hand back in. Whatever your business, get things moving with BT Halo for Business. Combining fibre, unlimited mobile and a digital phone line, it's got everything you need to connect your business. BT. Beyond limits.
What's better than one NHL expert? How about two? On TuneIn Advantage, join Scott Burnside and Pierre LeBrun for weekly insight, interviews, and insider information from two of the most connected people in hockey.
Welcome in the GM of the San Jose Sharks, Doug Wilson. Doug, walk us through the moment when you find out that you're a member of the 2020.
Well, it was an unexpected surprise. It was one of those moments we've got all our family.
Search TuneIn Advantage on TuneIn to listen.
To keep you and your loved ones safe during the coronavirus pandemic, TuneIn has the latest guidelines from the CDC. Wash your hands often for at least 20 seconds. Avoid close contact. If possible, maintain 6 feet from people who are sick or non-household members. Cover your mouth and nose with a face mask when around others. Clean and disinfect your area and make sure to monitor your health daily. For the latest stories and news updates on COVID-19, search Coronavirus News.
Business news anywhere. We've actually given the matter quite a bit of thought.
Let's get now to our guest joining us from Bangkok. She joins us on the phone from the Hudson Valley.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com.
What does that moral leadership look like to you?
At Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Seeing a lot of divergence within the market in terms of valuation.
There is a disconnect between what's happening in public equity markets and what's happening on the ground.
The stock market doesn't reflect the real economy. Mainstream is struggling.
The pace will probably slow down now that we've had this quick rebound.
We've got less supply, we've got demand being stimulated, and that imbalance should lead to higher prices.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrell, and Lisa Abramowitz.
Good morning, everyone. Jonathan Farrell, Lisa Abramowitz, and Tom Keene. It's a Bloomberg simulcast, Bloomberg Radio and Bloomberg Television across this nation. It is not a usual August. It is highly unusual, different from 1998, but certainly some of these trends are jaw-dropping. Lisa, what is so different today within the data check I'll run through here is bonds participate. It is decidedly risk-on.
Yeah, although you have to say, when you've got a 10-year yield that's below 1%, to say that a decidedly different tone with yields going up indicates just where we are in this cycle. I will say, Tom, also important to note that as yields rise, yes, they are moving up, bond prices down. You are seeing real yields remain deeply negative.
Oh, they're deeply negative, and they're plunging right now. That's the right word. We are at a 1.00, negative 1.00, and now at negative 1.03 on the U.S. 10-year. That's a really extraordinary drop, not down near the lows near a 1.05, 1.06 that we saw, but this will be a huge theme. I mean, Lisa, what will you listen for from Chairman Powell on Thursday?
Well, basically how much they're going to keep yields low and how much they perceive themselves as dampening bond yields versus the bond market, simply looking at the reality of the economy today. I really think it's important to note, even as yields move up, they are not moving up as quickly as inflation expectations. Again, speaking to the Fed's control and influence over the market.
And Greg Valliere publishing moments ago with AGF, of course, he's looking at the Republican National Convention, but really talking about Powell setting up a new theoretical path for the Fed to a forced higher inflation. At least that's the hope and the prayer. Let's do the reality of a data check right now. Futures up 14, Dow futures up 190. The VIX finally breaks down under 22, 21.53. As I mentioned, yields higher, 10-year yield by 3 basis points up. That inflation-adjusted yield, the tips, the 10-year piece down to negative 1.03. That gets my attention. As does weaker dollar, certainly quite important with Euro 118.18. We'll leave it. The Turkish lira, excuse me, doesn't break down this morning. There are two kinds of technical analysis, which, by the way, really works on Bloomberg Radio, and we say good morning to all of you. One of them is stochastic, which is the movement, the spikes, trying to catch the knife in the dark, and the other is trend-based analysis. Anybody that knows my work over the years knows I am totally and completely in the trend-based camp, as is Christopher Verone, the fabulous technical analyst at Strategas. Chris, it was great to hear your children in the background before they were sequestered, before we came on. What is it like naming your young children Support and Resistance? Did that go over well with Mrs. Verone?
You know, it didn't go over as well as you might think.
Support and resistance is the trend right now. What is the equity market trend now? Are we breaking out of resistance to new higher levels?
Yeah, and I think that's clear, but what I think is less clear and arguably more important is under the surface, we continue to see signs that participation is actually getting broader here. And you see it with just over the last month, the re-involvement of industrials, the improvement in discretionary. I mean, these are groups that have largely been relative laggards for the past 2.5 years that are starting to showcase some type of relative strength. That is welcome. I think it reflects a broadening of leadership.
Right.
And that's certainly something I think most participants have been craving.
This word relative, folks, is absolutely foundational trend-based analysis. And I want to go to the relativeness, Christopher Verone, of those 8 stocks that are going up. We know who they are, the digital dominance and everything else. For everything else to improve and go up, do they do it on an absolute basis, or do they simply have to do it relative to a stable or even advancing tech group?
I think they have to do it on a relative basis, and what I'm encouraged by is that it's actually happening. I'll give you a couple of examples. When you look at, like, Transportation Group, for example, we look at transport relative to utilities as a barometer for cyclicality. Transports have underperformed utilities for the better part of the last 2.5 years. That has decisively changed over the last 8 to 12 weeks. We see it with the broader industrial sector. Yesterday, consumer discretionary flipped to positive in our relative trend model. So all the things you'd want to see that would support the idea that participation, particularly in relative terms, Tom, as you talk about, I think that's important. All the things you'd want to see in that front are happening.
I'm surprised to hear you say this, because we hear from Morgan Stanley's, we hear from their chief equity strategist that he thinks that we're going to see a potential sell-off if we get an ongoing optimism in the economy. The idea of Mike Wilson coming out and saying that because of how narrow the leadership has been, it makes this rally fragile. What are you seeing that he's not?
Well, I think what's most important, and this has been the focus of our work over the last number of weeks, is that the leadership tone of the equity market, we think, is telling us, is screaming at us, that you should expect a positive economic surprise in the back half of the year. We just can't think of any other reason why things like industrials and discretionary and materials and transports would be acting as well as they are here. And frankly, that's pretty consistent with what you would expect to see in the first several months of a new economic cycle. So I think the market is telling us the consensus is probably still too pessimistic about the trajectory of the economy from here.
Although, Chris, I wonder about fundamental analysis at a time when Best Buy this morning was the latest company to withdraw any prediction for how their business would do for the rest of this year. How accurate can traders be in this equity market at a time of such limited visibility?
Well, I would just posit, is this really any different from any other moment in history? And it's easy to say yes, but I would argue that it's not. And by that I mean, go look 5-6 months off any major market low in history. You're not going to like where the economy was. You're not going to like the visibility that was in front of you. That's the game we play. That's investing. So I don't think this is as unique as the consensus wants it to be. I think what you've seen historically is markets discount future improvement. I don't think the market's describing the economy today. I think the market's describing the economy that's in front of us, and I think it's stronger than what the consensus expects.
Okay, Chris Verone, I looked at the SPX and I used a fancy moving average study. This is 3 moving averages. Good morning, George Kleinman out in Nevada, if you're watching. Chris Verone, I looked at the trend base and it's extremely well behaved, extremely well contained. Can you extrapolate to a target? And if so, how far out can you go with enthusiasm?
So the only targets we care about are higher or lower, and that means is the trend up or is the trend down? I think the trend is up here, and that tells us, Tom, what rules we're playing by. And when trends are positive, you buy weakness. You know, it's been 5 or 6 months since we've had anything more than a 5 or 6% drawdown. Is it reasonable that we may get something like that over the next several months? Of course it is. But how do we want to treat weakness? We want to be buyers of weakness when participation is expanding and when trend is up. And I think that's still the base case here.
Which sector's the best value, the rest relative value? I mean, I want to buy the dip in Amazon. Maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. The banks are unloved. Which is the Chris Verone sector where you get the pop off everything else?
I think industrials are emerging as multi-year leaders here. They, frankly, have been in purgatory for the better part of the last half a decade. I think that's changed in a meaningful way. I would encourage everyone to look at an equally weighted industrial sector relative to the S&P. You just broke out from a 5-year base. This is the real deal. This is the start of meaningful leadership in that group.
Let's say yields rise. At what level do they have to rise to that could potentially disrupt your theory and you could see a sell-off in stocks?
Well, I think what's interesting is this is the point in a new economic cycle where you would actually expect to see yields start to rise. I think the fact that they haven't is, in many respects, adding more fuel to this cyclical bias that has started to emerge. In many respects, you know, go back to, let's call it mid-2018, late 2018, bond yields were 3%, cyclicality was starting to peak, Chinese stocks were rolling over, Chinese bond yields were rolling over. All the exact opposite trends are playing out right now. So I think there's runway before you could say yields are a big problem to disrupting the story. I don't know whether that's 90 basis points, 100 basis points, 110 basis points, but I think it's higher than where it is right now.
Very good. Christopher Owen, thank you so much. And I'm glad you got support and resistance. And I know resistance is the problem, a child. Mr. Verone is with Strategas Research Partners. Lisa, what's extraordinary about this, and I go back to Stuart Kaiser of UBS, is the idea of the cash on the sidelines. I think that's something we've really got to lean on here into Labor Day. It's a late Labor Day, September 7th this year.
Yeah, although some people pointing to that as a potential myth. The idea of how much are people putting in cash-like funds. For example, I don't know, triple leverage cash fund, if they have it, or just putting it in a mattress, if they have that. Tom,
it's comfortable, but you mentioned the money market funds yesterday almost getting support off that low yield.
Well, yeah, the idea that some of these fund managers are suspending fees for money market funds to avoid having an effective negative yield shows the pressure that money market funds are on. I mean, even Afterthought, right? That's what you named your child. I mean, he's got support and resistance. You have Afterthought, so
she is.
I don't know. Who's the problem child there?
That's all the stresses, too, and thank you for all the emails we've received on this great national conundrum of back to school. It was interesting to talk to Congressman Westerman of Arkansas about the challenges, like what do you do at the college level within a very football South as well, and it goes right down to nursery schools and all that. It's a huge national issue, Lisa.
Yeah, and yesterday Zoom had some problems, and I will say I was in the front lines of that because my youngest went back to school, and the Zoom line went down, and it was a crisis. You know, there are all these sort of troubleshooting, and it just shows how changed this moment is when a Zoom shutdown or a Zoom slowdown disrupts school for an entire nation.
No, we didn't. This goes back to Mark McCormick, folks. We didn't find the Zoom experiment successful because all the kids are sneaking Bed Wars, Minecraft, and all the rest of this garbage while they're quote-unquote in school.
Yeah. We all live that.
I thought it was just my household, and then I was...
Oh, no.
No, that was not the case. Let me do a data check here. We do it on Bloomberg Radio and Bloomberg Television. I don't do it as nicely as Karen Moscow on Bloomberg Radio. Futures up 15, Dow futures up 197. The massive difference today is yields participate with a 3-beat move in the 10-year. Higher yields, 0.68%. 30-year bond buttressed right up against 1.40 as well. Dollar weaker, and gold down $14, $19.25 the ounce. It's a simulcast. This is Bloomberg Surveillance. Now with the latest news from New York City and around the world, here's Michael Barr.
Tom, Lisa, thank you very much. President Donald Trump and speakers at the Republican National Convention sought to paint a positive picture of his widely criticized handling of the coronavirus pandemic. Yesterday, Trump ridiculed Democratic rival Joe Biden for saying he'd shut down the economy again if needed. Meanwhile, one of the speakers last night was former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley. Today, on ABC's Good Morning America, she defended President Trump's record.
President Trump has passed criminal justice reform, which Obama and Biden didn't do. We saw the lowest unemployments of African Americans and Hispanics, which wasn't under President Obama or Biden.
On day 2, the keynote speaker will be First Lady Melania Trump. You can hear coverage of the convention tonight on Bloomberg starting at 10 p.m. Wall Street time. Buildings and cars were set on fire in Kenosha, Wisconsin amid another night of protests against police for the shooting of an unarmed black man Sunday. 29-year-old Jacob Blake remains in intensive care. His uncle Justin Blake says the family does not want to see any more destruction in the city.
We're going to demand justice, but we're going to do that without tearing up our own communities.
What did he say to you when you first talked to him?
That it was going to be all right.
Meanwhile, Blake's family has retained attorney Ben Crump, who also represents the family of George Floyd. Louisiana and the Gulf Coast is preparing for a rough few days of severe weather. Although Tropical Storm Marco lost steam, Tropical Storm Laura spent the weekend gaining strength as it brought destruction through the Caribbean. Louisiana Governor John Bell Edwards.
Everybody should understand this is going to be a very large, very powerful storm.
Laura could make landfall late Wednesday or early Thursday. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts, more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television.
A full house in the Northeast minutes before kickoff. Your thoughts, Jermaine?
Well, Alex, the sofa's at capacity, Coca-Colas are at the ready, and as usual, they're all shirtless.
Make your home the home end and win your club's new Premier League shirt with special packs of Coca-Cola, where everyone plays.
Motion valid 10th of August to 4th of October 2020. T's and C's apply. In store now.
September. Back to schools and colleges for all. Let's hear how it's been from Mum of 3, Jessica.
Well, 3 kids out of school has been tough. Trying to keep them to the routines and focused on their schoolwork is a balancing act like no other. It's going to be a bit different when they return to school, but I'm so relieved to get them back with the teachers in the classrooms.
If you have any questions or concerns about schools and colleges returning this term, go to gov.uk/back-to-school.
Let's face it, it's not been the year we expected. But that won't stop us squeezing the barbecue out of the shed, all squeezing onto one table, leaving room for the odd unexpected guest, down boy, while not forgetting to squeeze out every last drop of sunshine, or every last drop of Heinz. Heinz sauces, squeeze the most out of summer.
Right now, everyone wants to stay entertained for less, so we're giving you a massive entertainment package for a teeny tiny price. TalkTalk TV and Faster Fibre is just £25.50 a month, fixed for 18 months, plus a year of Amazon Prime on us. Average speeds of 38 megabits a second, plus unlimited fast delivery. Thousands of movies, TV shows, and more from Amazon Prime. Search TalkTalk TV. TalkTalk for everyone. Offer ends 2nd of September, subject to availability. T's and C's apply.
Biden's radical left-wing policies would stop our economic recovery cold.
The economy is on the ballot. Law and order is on the ballot.
When it comes to what Joe Biden says he'll do, look at his actions. Look at his policies.
Joe Biden and the Democrats are still blaming America first. Donald Trump has always put America first.
Day one of the Republican National Convention, very, very interesting. And, of course, day two, Kevin Cirilli saying clearly the First Lady taking the high ground tonight, but others speaking as well, including a widely anticipated speech by the Secretary of State. Right now, and it is a great joy to speak to Terrence Haynes. He's at Pangea Policy, writing a really grounded, business-centric policy note out of Washington, and he really sums it up nicely. Stuck doing just war duty, I say, out in western Maryland. Folks, this is not Baltimore. If you go out west of Maryland past Hagerstown, it is some of the most gorgeous country in this nation. And Mr. Haynes joins us from western Maryland this morning. Terry, the distance from Hagerstown to Baltimore, from Cumberland to Baltimore, is the space between the Republican and the Democratic Party. How does Mr. Trump stretch that space? How does he get east of Hagerstown more towards the suburb voters that he needs?
I think two ways, Tom. One, you're absolutely right about the chasm between Hagerstown and Baltimore. He does it in two ways. One, he excites his base. He tells a story, and one of the great things about conventions is that they're rare opportunities for a candidate and a party to tell an unfiltered story, and that's what, of course, the Democrats did last week, but the Republicans are doing this week. He reminds people of accomplishments. He contextualizes that, but then that's the positive message. And then the negative message is, of course, he differentiates very strongly from what the Democrats might prefer. And to reach beyond the base and get the independents is actually an opportunity for Trump right now. There was a recent poll that was highlighted by the Axios site that showed that only 32% of independents had a positive view of Biden. So that's fertile ground for Trump to really start hammering in that the economy is at stake, that law and order is at stake, those sorts of things. And you appeal to people's most basic instincts and hopes and fears, and you tell that story fairly free of nuance, and you can get there.
Within this unique 2020, how is his law and order message different from Richard Nixon a lifetime ago?
Frankly, it's broadly similar, it appeals to the most likely voters. And this is an election that's already substantially tightened. I mean, this whole idea that Biden's running away with anything is last month's news. You've got. People like to talk about Real Clear Politics average. The national average for Biden now is about 7.5, and in the battleground states, it is about 4. One way to look at that is it's barely above the margin of error, and we're 2 months away from the election. And so, he can hammer on that and appeal to people's pocketbooks and their most basic desires and fears about security, and he can continue to eat into what remains of a Biden lead.
It was interesting to me when I was looking at your notes, Terry, that you think that President Trump has a 60% chance of re-election. That does not seem to be the consensus. How much pushback do you get to that?
Oh, I get pushback about that all the time, Lisa. And I would say two things. Three things, but one of which I've already said. The race is already tightening and kind of moving in that direction. Secondly, the last thing that polls are predictive, and any pollster would tell you that. Thirdly, these polls look at the wrong things, frankly. No disrespect to anybody that's doing them. But they're looking at, by and large, national snapshots of registered voters. What you will then, and they're already tightening, and what you'll start to see is more attention paid to state-by-state races of likely voters, and there's a huge disparity between registered and likelies. That'll mean that the race tightens even further, that Trump wins. Turnout here is going to make all the difference, and frankly, Trump touts an enthusiasm advantage, but that enthusiasm advantage is real, and it's going to be hard for Democrats to make that up.
Well, when you talk about who's going to win the presidential race, it's unclear what the market effect will be. It is clear that if there is an increase in tensions between the U.S. and China that is broadly viewed as a market negative, what is President Trump's policy that we may hear from Secretary of State Mike Pompeo tonight, especially given the easing in some of the tensions of late between the U.S. and China?
Let me say two things about that. One, what Pompeo is likely to say is, look, we wasted 2 decades on hoping China would grow up and become a mature member of the community of nations, and take the WTO obligations and others seriously. We're clearly past that, and but only Trump could stood up to that. Obama and Biden were responsible for a decade of that sort of thing. The other thing I would say is that I think markets miss to some extent. They tend to think that one bad thing is happening between the United States and China. That means that all bad things are increased. I don't think that's true. It remains in the mutual interest of the U.S. and China to continue to trade and to continue to say positive things about Phase 1, even as tensions are on the rise between the two nations and other geopolitical matters. It was the former British Prime Minister that noted that great nations have only interests, not friends. It remains in the mutual interest of these two countries to trade. They'll continue to do that, and they'll continue to say positive things about Phase 1, which I think is a market plus.
Terry Haynes, thank you so much. And certainly we saw that this morning, folks. A little bit of trade news there, giving us further enthusiasm. Day one enthusiasm Friday, Monday, now into Tuesday. The market elevation. Dow futures up 168. S&P futures up 13 as well. It's going to be fascinating to see what happens, not so much through the conventions, day 2, day 3, day 4, Lisa, but it's going to be fascinating to see how the campaigns adjust, say, for the next 5 or 7 days after the Republicans end.
Yeah, again, the world by Zoom, the world by video. At what point can you maintain the same kind of enthusiasm that will get people out to vote if you don't have the clapping and you don't have the camaraderie of in-person meeting?
And that's Mr. Trump's sharp distinction, is he's not doing Zoom. He's doing more of a produced RNC moment versus what we saw of the Democrats, which was zoomy, to say the least.
Zoomy. I like that. That's going to be a new thing. I like that, Tom.
Our special coverage tonight, David Weston will not use the word zoomy. Republican National Convention, look for that at 10 p.m. tonight on Bloomberg Television and Bloomberg Radio. Look at the dollar here, dollar weaker fractionally as well. I'm watching Turkish lira as well, really buttressed up against 7.40 as well. Please stay with us. It is a simulcast, including at 98.1 FM in Washington, D.C. Lisa Abramowitz, Tom Keene, also with John Farrow. This is Bloomberg.
The following is a message from PGIM.
Welcome to Outsea in 60, Perspectives from PGIM Thought Leaders. Here's Mark Baribeau, the head of Global Equity at Jennison Associates.
You're looking at bigger implications of technology playing a role in keeping us all, giving us access to information or goods very quickly. So we don't see any of those trends changing. In fact, they're likely to accelerate. There's some new things that have come along, though, that people might find useful, like telemedicine. There were skeptics about that, and I think the more people using it, especially the more doctors are using it today, the more they're liking it. You can see more patients, it can be more effective. It might actually be a better solution.
Hear more PGIM perspectives at pgim.com. That's PGIM.com. Partner with PGIM, the investment management business of Prudential. These statements are not intended to be investment advice and should not be used as the basis for any investment decision.
Elite advisory firms rely on BNY Mellon's Pershing to meet the needs of their most complex clients. Karen Novak, Chief Operating Officer at Pershing Advisor Solutions, explains how.
At BNY Mellon's Pershing, we bring customized insights and strategies to help you grow your advisory business and stay on the leading edge. We can support the needs of your most sophisticated clients with a full range of investment and wealth management solutions, from access to private banking to consolidated bank and brokerage custody. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength and high-touch service that BNY Mellon's Pershing can provide. Are you well positioned to stand out from your competition?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Brokerage custody provided by Pershing LLC and other services provided by Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC. Both members of FINRA and SIPC. Private banking and bank custody provided by BNY Mellon NA. Member FDIC.
Tesco Mobile brings you the amazing iPhone 11 with a dual camera system for incredible photos for just $31.99 a month. And when you join Tesco Mobile, you'll also get up to £40 a month off your Tesco shopping in store. Because we're the only network to give you Club Card Plus for 6 months. See us in store or search Tesco Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
36-month credit and rolling monthly airtime agreements with Tesco Mobiles. Club Card Plus. Eligibility and conditions apply. Renews at $7.99 a month unless cancelled. £40 saving based on 10% off 2 in-store shops at £200 max spend monthly.
Don't miss the buy one, get one half price event, now on at Lloyd's Pharmacy. You'll find something for everyone when you mix and match across hundreds of products. Everything from big brand skincare like Aveeno, back to school essentials for the little ones, a wide range of vitamins and supplements, plus much, much more. So don't miss the buy one, get one half price event. Shop in store or online at lloydspharmacy.com today. Lloyd's Pharmacy, always here for you. Cheapest item half price, selected lines only, subject to availability. Excludes Lloyd's Pharmacy stores within Sainsbury's.
Did somebody say just me? Get delivery like a G. See, hungry dogs gotta eat. I get mines every day, every week. Chicken wings to the crib, I'm sitting in. Burger in the low-low. Hope they put the pickle in. Wonton on a catamaran. Oodles and noodles. Thank you, my man. Justeat. Somebody say just eat.
Good morning, everyone. Bloomberg Surveillance, Lisa Bramlett and Tom King, John Farrell off, which is a good and beautiful thing. Futures up 15, Dow futures up 186 as well. Lisa, what do you see on the screen of interest?
Well, basically, when you talk about yields higher, I think that that's really important. I was still here stunned, Tom, that you were saying it's a good and beautiful thing that John was off on vacation. I'm going to tell him that when he comes back, so that when you harangue him from going on sabbatical, he will know you actually had his back, Tom.
Yeah, but the difference is we're kidding about you and me. He's really on sabbatical. I think it's like Bremer going off to Nantucket. He's out writing a book or something. I don't know.
We're going to hear all about the tots. He's writing a book on the tots.
No,
just for you, Tom.
No, I'm working on that treatment. He's working on the history of AC Milan, but it hasn't. I don't know if he's got a movie rights yet on that. So, anyways, futures up 14, and what we thought we'd do right now. Usually, it's economic data, 8:30, and all that. Is have the definitive conversation of the day on what we're going to hear from Chairman Powell. We can do that with James Sweeney. He is at Credit Suisse. He's been there all of 20 years, which shocks me as well. But James Sweeney has absolutely turned cautious here. I was stunned in his last visit with us how cautious he was on the American economic experiment, and we get a brief on what Mr. Powell needs to do. James Sweeney, this is always an important speech that's widely understood. Inflation will be the topic. How does a central bank manufacture inflation?
Well, I mean, they know that they need to continue to supply stimulus to the economy, and they've been moving towards this framework review, which is likely to signal a tolerance for overshooting inflation, meaning, somewhere north of 2%. Inflation would not trigger immediate interest rate responses from the Fed, sometimes several years in the future. So that's really what we expect from them today. In general, though, the short-term caution is about the lack of a stimulus bill, persistent high unemployment, risks of inflation staying lower for longer. And I think the Fed is very focused on all of these risks, and I think some people in financial markets are not. But we will see as we go through what's set to be a pretty turbulent autumn, whether market and economic data could trigger more than just talk from the Fed, but more action.
I give immense credit, folks, to Olivier Blanchard, his tour of duty at the IMF, now at the Peterson Institute, for jump-starting this discussion. But, James, what the magnitude difference here is different. Olivier Blanchard created a firestorm of controversy talking about a goosing of 3 and even 4% inflation. I'm not hearing that from the Fed. What are they talking about? Nudging it up to 2.05 or 2.1% inflation?
Yeah, I think it's in the tens of basis points that they would tolerate. I don't think we're talking about 3% core inflation or anything like that. And I mean, the difference between headline and core is important because energy prices can throw the headline inflation numbers around a lot. But I don't think that we're going to see 3% core inflation with, the Fed the short rate at close to zero. anytime in the future. But what they're saying is that immediately drifting above 2% is not going to prompt immediate interest rate increases.
James, we've been getting inflation, some pretty serious inflation. I'm speechless, tongue-tied over how much asset prices have inflated, and the fact that we hear less and less about this from Federal Reserve officials who dismiss that as just a part of how to get to a more stable economy. But at what point does the Fed have to take a look at just how much asset prices have increased and the lack of any gains that we're seeing necessarily in the economy from the regime that led to those higher asset prices?
Well, that's right. I mean, it's the lack of attractive yields on fixed